All right, we're back. Excuse me, we're back. I will briefly orient us for the recording here. Good afternoon. We're reconvening after lunch on December 13th, 2023. I'm Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board, and this is a continuation of the hearing on the pending petition for change by the City of Solvang of Water Right Permit 15878, which authorizes diversions of water from the Santa Ynez River in Santa Barbara County. Where we left off this morning, we heard the remaining rebuttal witness for CDFW as well as NIMFS, and we heard opening statements from CCRB and the parent district. And where we're planning to pick up is with CCRB's rebuttal witnesses. My understanding is Mr. Mulder will go first this afternoon. I had asked all of you to consider and talk to consider a surrebuttal and in the city's case, speak with Mr. Nicely if he would be, assuming he would be your surrebuttal witness about dates that may work early to mid-January. And maybe at this time, what I'll do is go around the room and ask each of the parties whether you, based on the scope of surrebuttal that we talked about, whether your intent would be to have us present a surrebuttal witness and their availability to the extent you know it at this time. So I'll look to you first, Ms. O'Sullivan. Were you able to have any of these conversations or have anything to report?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Kinsey. I was able to touch base with Mr. Nicely, who would be the witness that we would call, obviously for the surrebuttal that's already been submitted on behalf of Mr. Nicely. And then also for any, we would want to submit surrebuttal from him on the limited disconnection issue. And he is available, and both, council as well for the city are available on January 11th, 12th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. So hopefully that gives enough options with everyone else's schedules.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you doing that over the lunch. Maybe I'll continue around and look to CCRB. Would you intend to present a surrebuttal witness? And then also your availability, and if you have a witness, your witness's availability to the extent you know.
At this point, I don't know that we'll be presenting a witness. We'd like to continue to think about that. My inclination is no, to be clear, but in any event, the only constraint on my availability on the dates that Ms. O'Sullivan identified is on January 11th, but all of the other days that she identified would work for me.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Continuing, I'm just going down the list here. I will go to Mr. Stroud if you're with us for the parent district.
Yes.
Do you have availability to participate on the dates other than the 11th? Sounds like the 12th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th.
I would not have availability on the 12th unless we started later in the morning, I think about 10. But other than that, those days are fine with me. And at this time, the parent district wouldn't contemplate having a witness.
Thank you. And Mr. Kvistad, do you have any constraints on your availability? I'm looking.
Constraints. The week of January 15th would be better.
Yes.
I've got a tentative vacations. It hasn't been firmed yet for the week of January 8th.
Okay. Then we'll focus on the week of the 15th.
Yeah, and I have to talk to my client about whether on this one of the particular issues you raised, whether we would want to have a witness.
Understood. Thank you. And Ms. Hastings, you're next on my list. How is your availability that week?
The week of the 15th, starting the 16th, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Looks good. The 18th, it is not preferred, least
preferred.
Least preferred, yes. So if we could do the Tuesday, the 16th or the 17th, that would be best. I have a potential out of town meeting. And then I second Mr. Kvistad's comments with respect to this additional issue. Frankly, I'm still trying to get my mind wrapped around whether this is a new issue or is subsumed within the original hearing issues. So again, like Mr. Kvistad, would like time to confer with my client about whether any rebuttal on this subflow issue.
Understood. Thank you. I appreciate that. I will turn to the fisheries entities, Mr. Puccini and Ms. Germanario. Do you at this time anticipate having a rebuttal witness, and what is your availability?
We don't anticipate a rebuttal witness. We would just limit our participation to cross-exam of Mr. Nicely as far as we can see at this point. In terms of availability, the 5 days that work for us would be the 10th, 11th, 12th, 18th, and 19th.
So not the 16th and 17th.
Correct.
Okay. And then I will look to Ms. Beal. Do you anticipate a rebuttal witness, and how is your availability on the days we discussed? I can't hear you, although I see you're off mute.
I don't believe we would present a rebuttal witness, but I'd like an opportunity to confer with my client about that before making a final call, if that's okay. And then I believe most of those dates are okay for our attendance.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Ms. Hall.
We would not anticipate doing a rebuttal witness. However, I will be going on maternity leave in early January. So I checked with the other attorneys available. So Linda Kropp, who's also on the service list for this matter, could be available January 9, 12, 15, and 16. But I realize that doesn't give us much overlap. There's one more attorney here who is not currently on this matter, but to the extent she could just monitor the hearing, I have a few more dates that would open things up.
Okay. I think, thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Hall. And then Ms. Hastings, I was going to just confirm that I know you mentioned the 18th was least preferred. Did that also apply to the 19th? I can't, you're on mute.
It does. The 18th
Okay.
and the 19th. I'm supposed to be out of town, but I thought that I had heard everyone confirm that they were available on the 12th.
Later no, I think Mr. Kvistad has a tentative vacation, which includes the 12th. Is that
I see. Okay.
correct?
Well,
yeah.
Well, if I am the only outlier for those dates, and I hate to make everyone go around the room again, I think what I'll do is try to see if I can limit that trip to the 18th and return. So that would free up the 19th for possibility of this hearing.
Okay. And I appreciate all of you working on this. So we're putting out the possibility of January 19th, which I think the only conflict was Ms. Hastings and then possibly Ms. Hall. I think you would have to confer with to find other representation, and you'll be hopefully enjoying your maternity leave. So that's great.
Correct. I think that might work, not for Linda, but for another attorney here.
Yeah. And it sounds like we're narrowing down to pretty limited issues, which is good. That's the point of this process. Well, let's table that for a moment. I want to make sure we get to our witnesses this afternoon and get through those. But it sounds like what I will be doing is issuing a hold for January 19th. And we also would need to talk about a deadline for submitting Sir rebuttal in writing. Maybe I can ask you that now, Mr. Kim or Ms. O'Sullivan. Do you have since it sounds like Mr. Nicely may be the only Sir rebuttal witness and he's already submitted a portion of his testimony, do you have any proposals about when, if we were to hold the hearing on the 19th, when in advance of that you could submit his testimony in writing?
I would have to discuss that with Mr.
Yeah.
Nicely. We were only able to have a very brief conversation during the lunch break based on his availability on the dates he could testify. And so we'll have to circle. I could commit to getting back to you by the end of the week with a proposal if that's acceptable. So Mr. Nicely and Mr. Kim and I have a chance to understand, how much work would go into the limited Sir rebuttal that we're talking about.
Yes, I think maybe that will probably work. We can talk about it again before we end the day, but I think maybe we can set a deadline of for a proposal that would make sense for a proposal on when to have that Sir rebuttal submitted. We can talk about that. Okay. Let's table that unless there's other issues we should talk about in the moment. And I think I'd like to go ahead and get to our witnesses. Is there anything else we need to address now? All right, Mr. Bivens, are you prepared to call CCRB's first rebuttal witness?
We are, and that will be Mr. Joel Mulder. I see him there on the screen. Excellent.
I see you, Mr. Mulder. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
If you would please raise your right hand and I will administer the oath. Mr. Mulder, do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. You may go ahead, Mr. Bivens.
Thank you. And while I do our preliminary question, Ms. Mullen, if you could please pull up Exhibit CCRB 14 from Mr. Mulder's summary slides. Mr. Mulder, thanks for being here today. Is Exhibit CCRB 1 a true and correct copy of the written testimony you submitted in this matter?
It is.
And please go ahead and summarize your written testimony for the hearing officer, please.
Thank you. Again, my name is Joel Mulder. I introduced myself momentarily here. I've been a fisheries biologist for more than 22 years. I've worked with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the U.S. Forest Service, and most recently as a consultant. I've worked extensively on native endemic fishes in California, including steelhead and other salmonids. I've worked on habitat, fish passage assessments, fish passage projects, been approved by the state and the federal government for handling and surveying and relocation of steelhead on multiple projects. I've served as a technical expert on numerous ESA Section 7, Section 10 consultations and on technical advisory to CEQA and NEPA documents. I've worked on the Santa Ynez River since 2006 as a consultant for CCRB. I've assisted them with their ESA Section 7 consultation for the Kachuma project, worked with them on other water order matters. I've conducted a series of various special studies on the river on their behalf, technical professional review of annual monitoring reports by Kachuma Operations and Maintenance Board. Let's move on to my first slide here, Sam. Right, so my testimony here is provided in rebuttal to the testimony provided by Dr. William Trush. And in summary, my testimony can be boiled down to really three main points. My first point is that Dr. Trush appears to assign rather equal weight to the entirety of the lower Santa Ynez River in regards to the availability and suitability of the habitat there for steelhead spawning and rearing. However, both historical and current information indicate that downstream of the project area, the habitat was and is often unfavorable for steelhead, particularly outside of lighter year types. Further, current monitoring has observed very low abundance and distribution of Omicus in this section of river. And when present, have been found really in isolated areas during, again, wetter year types. Thus, Dr. Trush's recommendation on limits to permit 15878 are not commensurate with the existing habitat conditions and the limited steelhead presence in this area. My second point is that we currently have in place Water Board Order 2019-0148. That order does provide flow regimes for the protection of fisheries resources. But Dr. Trush's recommendations are not consistent with or commensurate to the types of measures in the existing order that were found to be protective of steelhead habitat. My final point is that, while I'm not advocating that it should do so, should the water board feel the need to place limits on the permit, it's my professional opinion that there are ways to do so in a fashion that is more appropriate to the existing habitat conditions. Next slide, please. So regarding steelhead spawning and rearing habitat, historical observations prior to construction of Bradbury Dam found that the river is dry over large sections in most years, beginning in the spring and early summer. Spawning has been noted to occur, but those areas subsequently went dry during summer months. There's been extensive rescue operations prior to the construction of Bradbury Dam, rescuing millions of Omicus from the drying river. USGS monitoring station gauge data confirms observations of extremely low flows during most dry seasons and, in fact, non-existent in dry years. More recent studies conducted by CERTAC Home suggest that really the suitable rearing habitat is primarily found in just a few miles downstream of Bradbury Dam, and that the remainder of the river is generally unsuitable for both spawning and rearing, though there are refuge pools that occur. And that sentiment was echoed in the MINT's 2000 buyout. The next slide, please. This figure is depicting the gauge data that I mentioned. So this is gauge data from the gauge at San Lucas Bridge, or the Highway 154 bridge, as it's called today. This is for the years 1929 through 1952. So this is prior to the construction and storage of water in Lake Kachuma. On the y-axis of these, we have the daily flow in CFS. And on the x-axis, we have the percent of time that the flow is at or below that flow rate. The left-hand chart here is showing January through October for those years. This would be the time of year where we have bulk of our precipitation, so it includes the wetter time portion of the year. The chart on the right is June through November. So this is the drier portion of our year in Southern California and what we refer to often as the rearing season for steelhead. You can see in this chart on the left that the median flow across all those years, this is even including the wetter times of year, was only 0.8 CFS. And on the right-hand side, again, the drier time of year, you can see that flows were, below 1 CFS somewhere around 70% of the time, and below 2 CFS somewhere around 80% of the time. So again, demonstrating the overall very dry nature of the stream prior to impoundment and use of water at Kachuma Dam. Next slide. Regarding the fish presence downstream of Alisal Bridge, so the Kachuma Operation Maintenance Board Fisheries Division has conducted snorkel surveys, as we discussed earlier in the day, downstream in the Avenue of Flags and Cadwell reaches. 18 years of survey data, 15 years out of 18, excuse me. 15 out of 18 survey years since 2005 had the surveys conducted, so 3 years were skipped. Of those 15 years, Omicus were observed in only 5 of those years. It's notable that 4 of those years in which they did observe fish were wet, and 1 year was a normal precipitation year following a wet year. Interestingly, often where there's hundreds of Omicus observed upstream of the Alisal Bridge in the area of river more favorable for steelhead, just downstream of the dam, even in those years, there are no fish observed in those survey reaches downstream of Alisal. I'd also note that survey results upstream of Alisol show declining abundance and distribution as you move downstream away from Bradbury Dam. Most of the fish are found in the very uppermost reach. Red and spawning surveys conducted by the Combe Fisheries Division since 2008 in the main stem. Those have only been conducted between Alisol and Bradbury, but have found only 7 reds, which is a pretty low number of spawning attempts, indicating poor habitat downstream of the dam, even the area that is considered more favorable for fish. And I would note that 2 reds were additionally discovered in 2021 down by the Narrows. Next slide. This is a summary table of the data I just discussed. You can see in bold the observations of Omicus and the apnea flags and capital reaches here. So just a summary of the Combe Fisheries Division snorkel survey data. And included on the bottom line there is the precipitation, an idea of what type of the year it was. Next slide, please. This is a summary table of the red observations just discussed. Next slide. So again, back to Dr. Trush's testimony, as we just discussed, he really didn't take into account the existing and historical conditions of the river that indicate this was not, even prior to construction of Bradbury Dam, an important reach for steelhead rearing. Seems to assume it has all equal weight, and the recommendations are not consistent with the existing Water Board Order 2019-0148. I'd also like to note that his analysis for his passage flows is inconsistent with his previous work done on this river, the Humboldt River Institute report, which he references in his testimony. And that passage flow analysis is based on fish from a completely different river system with no supporting evidence as to how it is applicable to this river. I'd also note that Dr. Trush's recommended term limiting diversion would actually result in flows higher than what his testimony analysis suggests are required, and is completely inconsistent with his previous work on the Humboldt River Institute report, where flows that were recommended were much lower. I'd also like to note that the peer review of that HRI report, which appears to be the underlying basis for Dr. Trush's testimony, did find some compelling issues with the methodology used for their flow calculations. And I've included that as an exhibit, CCRB 13 in my testimony. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, though I'm not advocating for it, should the board find that there are limitations that need to be placed on the diversion, one example of that could be something that doesn't lessen the effects of the flows that have already been prescribed under Water Board Order 2019-0148 beyond Alisol Bridge when Omicus are present downstream. And my final slide here is a flow chart that gives an example of how something like this could work. It's really just picking a hypothetical date, determining what the flow requirements would be at Alisol under Table 1 or Table 2 of Water Board Order 2019-0148. If the proposed diversion would cause flows to be less than what are prescribed by the board order downstream of Alisol, that they conduct a fish survey to see if fish are present downstream. If they are, then discontinue the diversion. If the diversion will not cause flows to be less than what are prescribed downstream of Alisol, then they could continue the diversion. So again, it's an attempt to continue or not lessen the effects of what has already been prescribed by the board as protective of steelhead downstream of Alisol. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mulder. I'm not sure what order we want to go on. Maybe I will start with Solvang. I think that makes sense. So with that, I will turn to you. Looks like Mr. Kim, will you be handling cross-examination of Mr. Mulder?
Yes, Officer Kunze.
You can please proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, if you could bring up CCRB 1 as well as CDFW 16, have those ready, and let me know when you have them ready. And while those exhibits are getting uploaded, good afternoon, Mr. Mulder. So I'm Tilden Kim. I'm one of the counsel for City of Solvang. Thank you for giving your presentation this afternoon. So Ms. Mullen, you can take that exhibit down. I'll just, refer to it when I need to, but I just wanted to make sure you have it ready. Great, thank you. So Mr. Mulder, in your slide presentation, as well as in your rebuttal testimony, you're suggesting a potential alternative permit condition in lieu of those offered by Mr. Trush, correct?
I'm providing an example of the type of limitation that I think would be appropriate. I am not necessarily advocating for that condition as suggested. It's open for interpretation, but it's the type of limitation that I feel would be appropriate.
Thank you for that clarification, that you're not advocating for that alternative proposal, but choosing that as an example as a possibility. Am I summarizing what you just said correctly?
Yes, that's accurate.
Great, thank you. And so part of this, possible suggestion would necessarily include knowing the flows in the avenue of Flags Reach, correct?
That is true.
And you're aware that the next stream gauge downstream from the avenue of the Flags reaches the Lompoc Narrows. Is that correct?
I'm aware of that.
You are?
Yes, I am aware of that.
Okay, thank you. And in your rebuttal testimony, I didn't see any explanation of how surface flows would be measured in the avenue of Flags Reach. Is that correct?
No, that is correct. I have not provided that.
And you're aware of other pumpers along the avenue of Flags Reach other than the City of Solvang, right?
I am.
And so other pumpers could potentially affect surface flow, correct?
If that's a hypothetical, I guess hypothetically I could agree.
Thank you. And so if there's any measured change in surface flow, it would not necessarily be solely attributable to Solvang pumping, right?
I couldn't say.
Objection calls for speculation.
I think you answered.
Overruled, and I think he answered it appropriately.
Yes,
Thank you.
I think you answered appropriately. Thank you. And in your suggestion, you also suggested that there be fish surveys to determine if there are omicas present in the Avenue of Flags Reach or the Caldwell Reach, correct?
I did.
But I didn't see in your rebuttal testimony any other protocols, when it should be done, how often it should be done, who pays for it. None of those details were in your rebuttal testimony, correct?
Those details are not included in my testimony. That is correct.
And if I can refer you to CDFW 16, Ms. Mullen, if you could bring that up for me. And so if we could just zoom out just a little so that we know what this document is. So CDFW 16 is for the water year 2022 annual monitoring survey for the biological opinion for the operation and maintenance of the Kachuma project on San Ynez River. And that's prepared by COM. And if you just go down just a little on that screen, Ms. Mullen, and it's dated June 9, 2023. You're familiar with this document, is that correct, Mr. Mullen?
I am.
Okay. And so if Ms. Mullen, if I could have you go to PDF page 61. Can you see the screen okay, Mr. Mulder?
Yes, Mr. Kim, I can see it.
Great, thank you. So the first sentence right below Calder Reach, it says the main stem downstream of the Avenue of the Flags Bridge is mostly comprised of private property that has been subdivided into subreaches. Do you see that?
I do see it.
Okay. So reading that, you don't dispute that that reach is mostly comprised of private property?
I will take the Combe Fisheries Division's word for it if they put it in this document. I would have no reason to doubt that.
Thank you. And so your suggestion assumes that the city will be able to obtain survey access from those same property owners, correct?
I don't believe I've made any assumptions in my recommendation or my proposed alternative. I've simply suggested a manner in which another alternative could be implemented.
All right, fair enough. And you're aware that Combe has already conducted fish surveys in the Avenue of Flags and Caldwell Reaches, correct?
I believe I summarized their data in my testimony.
And you're aware that Combe had been limited in their snowplow survey locations based upon where they had been granted access first.
Presumably based on the text in this document, yes.
And the Combe surveys occurred in spring, summer, and fall, right?
That's correct.
And you evaluated these Combe surveys from 2005 to 2022 in your testimony, correct?
Correct.
Now, if I could refer you back to the table that you showed in your slide, and maybe it's easier this way. Ms. Mullen, if you could take this exhibit down, and if you could bring up CCRB number 1, that's Mr. Mulder's rebuttal testimony. And if we can go to page 10 of Mr. Mulder's rebuttal testimony, which has table 1. And so if we could just zoom back a little so we can see more of that table. A little further back. And then a little higher up so we can see the table reference. Perfect. Thank you. So, Mr. Mulder, this is table 1 in your rebuttal testimony, correct?
It is.
And that table 1 is identified as number of omicas observed by mainstem reach by survey season and year 2005 to 2022, including precipitation and year type. And just for orientation, so this table has on the left-hand side spring, summer, and fall. And within those seasons, then you have the various reaches, and then on going to the right-hand side, then there's the number of omicas observed by reach by year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so when I was looking at this table, if there are no fish observed in the spring survey for the Avenue of Flags for a given reach, then I didn't see any fish observations in that same year for the summer and fall surveys. Would that be a correct conclusion?
I have not looked at the table on that matter, but my brief review here, that does seem to stand up.
So you're not seeing anything in this table that's different from the conclusion that I had reached.
I'm reviewing currently.
Take your time, please. Thank you.
If I understand your question, Is there an example of a survey in which fish were observed in the spring within a reach, but then not observed in a later survey? Is that your question?
I apologize if I was not clear. So my question is, if there are no observations of Omicus in the spring of any given year for the Avenue and Flags reach, could you find any observations of that in that same year in that same reach for summer or fall?
Unless I'm missing something, no.
Thank you. And it's the same question regarding the Caldwell reach. So for the Caldwell reach, if there are no observations in spring, can you find any observations for the Caldwell reach in that same year for summer or fall?
No, I cannot.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, now if you can go to page 15, please, of this exhibit. So, Mr. Mulder, this is the figure 3 in your rebuttal testimony, correct?
It is.
And in that big bubble on the left-hand side, it says Solvang diversion in occurring calculated surface flow loss is 1.6 CFS, right?
Yes.
And I didn't see anything in your rebuttal testimony that explained how that 1.6 CFS surface flow loss was derived at. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so you are assuming, for the purpose of this flow chart, that the surface loss. Let me just restate that. So you're assuming that the city's diversion will have an effect on surface loss, on surface flow.
I don't know that I would say I'm assuming that it will. I'm saying that should it, this would be one way to go about an alternative recommendation.
But you haven't done any analysis as to whether the city's ask, in these hearings would actually create a surface flow loss of 1.6 CFS, correct?
I have not.
And you're not a hydrogeologist, correct?
No, I'm not.
And nor are you a hydrologist.
I am not.
And you didn't rely on any testimony from a hydrologist or a certified hydrogeologist in creating this figure 3, correct?
In creation of the figure, no.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, if I can have you go to now paragraphs 13 through 16 of CCRB 1, so starting at page 9 of this exhibit. And if I could have you zoom out just a little so that we see more of this page. Thank you. So to reiterate, Mr. Mulder, you evaluated the Combe snorkel survey of Omicus from 2005 to 2022, correct?
Yes.
And your assessment based on these surveys is that the habitat is more favorable to Omicus upstream of the Alisal Bridge, correct?
I'm not sure that's the way I would phrase it necessarily. I don't believe I evaluated Combe assessment of habitat. I evaluated Comb's observations of steelhead.
Okay, and generally a feasible modification for species protection could be selecting the location of a project to avoid certain types of impacts to a species, correct?
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
Sustained. I think that's very broad, Mr. Kim. So, to be fair to the witness, if you would please narrow it down.
Well, so how about if I give you an example, Mr. Mulder? So you may suggest, shifting the footprint of a project to avoid filling a wetland, correct?
Same objection, incomplete hypothetical.
I think I understand. I mean, I understand your point, Mr. Kim, and I understand your client's position. So I'm not sure this is particularly productive. I'm trying to think of how to. Would you like to try again? I think that it is vague, but it's hard to. I understand what you're trying to ask. Do you have another shot at it?
No, Officer Mulder, I think you know where I'm getting at, and
Yes.
I've made my point, so I'll just go ahead and move on.
Great.
And so, last question, if we can go to page 3 of this exhibit, Ms. Mullen. And if we can go further down to paragraph 8. Thank you. So paragraph 8 of your testimony, Mr. Mulder, it says, to be clear, my testimony is not intended to express an opinion that such a condition should be imposed or that the approval of Solvang's petition will unreasonably affect the San Ynez River steelhead fishery. Do you see that?
I do.
And your testimony hasn't changed as you're sitting here today, correct?
It has not.
No further questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kim. I just wanted to, if we can actually stay. Oh, you're too good. You're too good, Ms. Mullen. Can we go back to? I was going to ask a question of Mr. Mulder, since it's on my mind. Can we go back to the? I think it's figure 3. It's the flow chart, the permit term condition, just really quickly. I don't know if any of you can help me out with the page, or maybe Ms. Mullen already knows where that flow chart is.
Page 15.
15.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. Mr. Mulder, when you were crafting this flow chart, did you consider a situation in which the calculated surface flow loss was not immediate, and therefore there would be a time lag between, you may shut off the pumps, but there still may continue to be impacts to that. Did you consider that possibility when you were crafting this permit term or your testimony?
I cannot say that I specifically considered a lag time or delay. Again, this is meant to be very general in nature, and the methods for implementation, measurement of flows, gauging, those things are not provided in this.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Mulder. I appreciate that. With that, I will continue with the other water user entities. Ms. Mullen, we can take this down now. Thank you. Mr. Stroud, do you have any questions, or the parent district, do you have any questions for Mr. Mulder?
We do not. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Kvistad, does ID number 1 have any questions?
We do not. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Hastings, do you have any questions?
Nothing.
Yep, got it. Great, thanks. I will turn to the fisheries entities. Ms. Germanario, do you have questions for Mr. Mulder?
Yes, we have a few.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, well, first of all, good afternoon, Mr. Mulder.
Good afternoon.
So, Ms. Mullen, I wanted to let you know there's a few exhibits I'd like to screen share. You don't have to pull any of them up yet, but they would be CCRB 1, CWW 126, CCRB 5, and CWW 127. And if you could let me know when you're ready with those, I'd appreciate it. And actually, if you could start by showing CCRB 1, that would be great. Great, thank you. And if you could go, Ms. Mullen, to paragraph 9 on page 4. Great, thank you. There is great, thank you. Okay, Mr. Mulder, I wanted to show you this and refer you to lines 5 and 6 here, or 5 through 7. So your testimony here is that the main stem Santa Ynez River downstream of Bradbury Dam has long been recognized as generally lacking adequate flow to support successful steelhead spawning and rearing, correct?
That is what it says.
And your opinion here was based in part on statements in reports by Leo Shapovalov, is that correct?
Yes.
Ms. Mullen, if you would please screen share exhibit CWW 126, please. Thank you. And we'll just stay on this first page for a moment to orient you, Mr. Mulder. So if we could scroll up to the title. Great. Oh, actually back to the first page. Thank you, that's great. And so the title of this report indicates that it is a report about fish resources in Santa Barbara County by Leo Shapovalov, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Mullen, if you could scroll down a bit to the bottom of the page to show the date. Great, thank you. So, and the date of this report is 1945, correct?
It is.
And so, Ms. Mullen, if you could go to page 4. Great. Let's see. So, I'll direct you to the section Fishery Management and Conservation Program. And here in the third sentence, the report states, the fish spawn in the main stem and in practically all tributaries below the present Gibraltar Dam, with the heaviest spawning taking place in the portions above the proposed Kachuma Dam, correct?
Yes, say that.
And Ms. Mullen, if you could go to page 5 of this same report. Thank you. And I'll direct you, Mr. Mulder, to first paragraph, a few lines down, I think it's the second sentence. It states, the very large size of the run is indicated by the fact that in 1944, the California Department of Fish and Game rescued around 1,036,980 young steelhead. And I'll skip a bit. These fish probably represented only a small fraction of the young steelhead produced, since large numbers migrated downstream prior to the start of rescue operations, correct?
Yes, say that.
And so, considering this passage, which states large numbers of young fish downstream in my, strike that, states that large numbers of young fish migrated downstream. This means the flows were connected and deep enough to provide fish movement leading up to and into the summer, correct?
Not necessarily.
But it's correct that it's stating these young fish were able to migrate. Is that correct?
Based on his observations, it appears that he thought that some fish moved down stream before they conducted the rescue. Yes.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, if you could scroll down just a little bit on the same page, just to show that second paragraph a little bit more. Thank you. That's great right there. And so, Mr. Mulder, on the second paragraph, second sentence, it states approximately 62% of the rescued fish are planted in live waters of the Santa Ynez River and its tributaries below Gibraltar Dam, correct?
It does say that.
And so based on that, it's fair to assume that there were sufficient flows in the main stem Santa Ynez River to support planted fish, correct?
No, I would not say that.
Okay, well, based on the last passage, it indicates, strike that, let me rephrase. Waters of the Santa Ynez River below Gibraltar Dam would include the main stem Santa Ynez River, correct?
Well, I think that there's a little bit more nuance than what the text might suggest here. So first of all, it does say in the Santa Ynez River and tributaries. It's not clear how many were planted in tributaries versus the Santa Ynez River. I'd also note that live waters of the Santa Ynez River could include something like the lagoon, which remains wetted all year round. To me, this does not necessarily imply that these fish were put into.
Thank you.
the
I think
middle
that
reaches.
answers the question.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna object. I think my witness ought to be able to answer these questions to the fullest extent he needs to.
I think, I mean, in this case, Mr. Boulder's response was helpful. He does get to answer these questions when there are caveats, but also understanding that, you know, a focused response is appropriate. So, Mr. Mulder, was there anything, were you cut off? Was there anything else you were going to add? I think you had finished your response.
I believe I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Germanario.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, if you could screen share CCRB 5. Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Mulder, you're familiar with this report, correct?
I am.
This is CCRB 5. If we could go to page 2, Ms. Mullen. Okay, if you could scroll down just a little bit. Okay, that's great. And so in the paragraph starting with in general, this report states, in general, it may be stated that the spawning areas in the Santa Ynez River are of very poor quality or unsuitable from the mouth to the entrance of Salsipuedes Creek, of doubtful quality from the latter point to the vicinity of Solvang, and excellent from Solvang to Gibraltar Dam, correct?
That's it. Not.
And from Solvang to Gibraltar Dam includes the proposed project area, correct?
I don't know. I mean, I know the project area is in the vicinity of Solvang, but I don't know where the demarcation line that Shapovalov is referring to here lies in relation to the project.
And if we could go to page 1 of this report, please, Ms. Mullen. Oh, actually, if you could stop there, thank you. And so here, the report states, I think it's the first, the last full paragraph shown here. The third stop of the day was made at the road crossing near the entrance of Kyoto Creek. Large numbers of steelhead were spawning in this vicinity, and many unoccupied, freshly completed reds were seen. Apparently, seepage exists in this area, as evidenced by an abundance of watercress. The spawning areas are excellent, correct?
It does say that.
And I think I was going to refer you to the next paragraph. If you could scroll down just a little bit, Ms. Mullen. Okay, thank you. And so the next paragraph goes on, the final stop of the day was made at the road crossing near the entrance of Alisal Creek, opposite Solvang. A pair of steelhead was spawning below the bridge and another pair was resting in a pool above it, correct? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the response.
Yes, you have correctly read what is written on the page.
Thank you. And so these passages show observations of steelhead spawning in portions of the Santa Ynez River as stated, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then let me see, Ms. Mullen, I think you could take this exhibit down for the time being. Thank you. And so just some general questions for you, Mr. Mulder, about the Shapovalov reports. So those reports that you relied on in your testimony, they did not survey all 92 miles of the main stem Santa Ynez River, correct?
That is my understanding.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't hear
That is my understanding, yes.
Thank you. And those reports that you relied on also did not describe surveys on privately owned property, correct?
No, there's no mention in there that I recall of private property.
So as a result, the reports you relied on do not represent a comprehensive accounting of historic flows in the main stem Santa Ynez River, correct?
Objection, vague and ambiguous. It's comprehensive.
Ms. Germanario, will you clarify what you mean by comprehensive in this question, please?
So the reports did not survey all of the portions of the main stem Santa Ynez River, including private land.
I think it's ambiguous in some of the documents.
Sorry, I didn't hear that response.
It is a bit ambiguous in some of the documents. Certainly there are observations at selected locations in some documents, but there are statements about conditions of the entirety of the river downstream at certain points as well.
Thank you. Okay, we can move on from that. So Ms. Mullen, if you could show CCRB 1 again. And if you could go to paragraph 11, which is page 8. Yep, thank you. And let's see. Thank you. So here in paragraph 11, your opinion is that, well, one of the opinions is that most of the apparently large number of Omicus present in the Santa Ynez River as of 1930 to 1946 were planted, correct?
That is a quote from Shapovalov, 1944, yes.
And so, to your knowledge, there have been no studies of the influence of stocked fish on overall Omicus populations in the Santa Ynez River, correct?
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly. Are you referring to the influence of the fish planted during that time period?
Yes, yes.
No, there has not been, to my knowledge.
And your opinion and the reports you reviewed do not indicate how the number of planted fish compared to the number of native Omicus in the system in the years from 1930 to 1946, correct?
Repeat the question.
Was there anything you reviewed that showed comparison of the number of planted fish versus native Omicus during these years, 1930 to 1946?
Comparison of the abundance or distribution of native Omicus, or are you talking about the fish that were rescued? I'm still not clear on what you're asking me.
Just number of planted fish versus number of native Omicus in the system.
The information I reviewed did not have data or observations of total number of native Omicus in the system, though I would note that these planted within the basin fish are native to the system. These were fish that were previously rescued, taken to a hatchery, and re-released into the system.
And your opinion in the reports you reviewed did not analyze the impacts of wildfires on the number of planted Omicus in the system during those years, correct?
Did not.
And then one more question on this. Your opinion in the reports you reviewed did not analyze the impacts of survival rates of hatchery fish when making conclusions about the impacts of planted fish, correct?
No, it did not make any analysis of survival rates of planted fish.
Thank you. Okay, then wanted to ask you a few questions about Kachuma Operations and Maintenance Board snorkel surveys. I'm not going to direct you to a specific part of your testimony, but my understanding is your opinion is that those comb snorkel surveys show limited steelhead presence downstream of Alisal Bridge. Is that correct?
In the Reaches survey, correct.
Ms. Mullen, if you could screen share CWW 127, please. Thank you. And so if you could remain there, thank you. Just to orient you to the document here, the title of this report is Unmanned Field Protocols Handbook. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Mullen, if you could scroll to page 10. Thank you. If you could scroll down a bit to the header, accuracy and precision considerations. Yes, that's great. Okay, so Mr. Mulder, this report states, and this is in the second paragraph, I believe it's the second sentence, Rogers et al. 1992 suggests that snorkel survey data should be calibrated with other methods because accuracy varies by sample reach and sampling conditions. Let me see, I'm going to skip a little bit here and go to the last sentence on this page. Small steelhead less than 100 millimeters were undercounted by, Ms. Mullen, if you could scroll to the next page to continue. Yes, right there, 40% in water less than 15 centimeters in depth and in areas with abundant cover, Hillman et al. 1992. Is that correct?
That is what it says.
And see, the next thing I wanted to point you to is on this page. Oh, the next paragraph here, it is recommended that snorkel surveys be conducted using standard procedures and calibrated periodically with estimates from other methods, correct?
Yes, it says that.
And so the comb snorkel survey data that you discussed in your written opinion were not calibrated using other methods, correct?
They were not, in that they are not able to be.
Thank you. I think that answers the question. And then due to this lack of calibration, the comb surveys may represent an undercount of fish, correct?
I have not reviewed this document, but I would say that when fish are present in very low numbers and very confined habitat units, you can trust that the numbers, while maybe not specifically accurate to the precise number of fish, are reflective of the general abundance of the fish in that area that you're surveying.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Germanario. Ms. Beal, do you have questions for Mr. Mulder?
Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Mulder. My name is Lori Beal, and I'm an attorney with the NOAA Office of General Counsel. So I'm here representing National Marine Fisheries Service. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I have a few questions based on your testimony. The first question is a little general, so I don't know if you would like your testimony to be pulled up to answer this. But I wanted to ask about your opinion that the main stem, Santa Ynez, has limited habitat value for rearing. So what I would like to ask is whether you are aware that the National Marine Fisheries Service has issued a recovery plan under the Endangered Species Act for the Southern California steelhead distinct population segment.
I am aware of that.
Have you reviewed that document?
I have, though it's been a little bit of time.
And did you rely on that document in preparing your opinion about the habitat value below Alisal?
Did not rely on that document.
Okay. Are you familiar with the critical habitat designation that the National Marine Fisheries Service has made for the Southern California steelhead DPS?
I am.
Do you know if that critical habitat designation encompasses any of the Santa Ynez main stem river?
It does.
So despite NIMS designating that Santa Ynez main stem as critical habitat, it's your opinion that that same habitat has limited value for steelhead rearing?
Yes, it is my opinion that it has limited value for steelhead habitat rearing and spawning in the area downstream of the proposed project.
So are you I
Go
didn't mean
ahead.
to interrupt.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just asking if it seems that you're disagreeing with the expert opinion of the National Marine Fisheries Service about the value of that.
Not at all. Not at all. The critical habitat, as I'm sure you are aware, at the time of designation was made up of primary constituent elements or elements of habitat that are critical for one or more lifestyles of the species, life stages of the species. One of those, I believe there's 6 primary constituent elements in the critical habitat designation for Southern California steelhead. One of those is migration habitat. There are others that are things like the condition of the ocean, which obviously don't occur here in this section of river either. So I don't disagree that this is included as part of critical habitat. My professional opinion would be that the PCE that most reflects that section of river is the migration habitat corridor.
I see. And did you review in preparing your testimony NIMS most recent 5-year review for the Southern California steelhead DPS?
I have reviewed it.
And did you rely on that document in preparing your testimony?
I did not.
Okay. Were you aware that in NIMS, the 2012 recovery plan, that the National Marine Fisheries Service identified the Santa Ynez River population as a Core 1 population for recovery purposes?
Yes, it's had that designation for quite a while.
Okay, and do you know what that designation means?
It's the highest priority for recovery.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned in your testimony, and again, please let me know if you'd like us to pull that up and we can all look at it, but you talked about NIMS 2000 biological opinion for Kachuma and state that the majority of the main stem serves as migration habitat in NIMS judgment, although as noted above, rearing and some spawning takes place in the first 10 miles below the dam. Do you recall that statement in your testimony?
I do.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, if we could just quickly pull up the NIMS Exhibit 23, or I mean quickly whenever you're ready to do that. Just wanted to take a quick look at that PDF, page 5, bottom of page 5 and top of page 6. So yes, we're so Mr. Mulder, I'm looking at this paragraph 11, and Ms. Mullen, if you could scroll up a little so we could see a bit at the next page. Are you familiar with the draft 2016 biological opinion that NIPS prepared for the Kachuma project operations, Mr. Mulder?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Did you review that document in preparing your testimony?
I reviewed it, yes, prior to my testimony, yes.
Okay. Did that inform your testimony in any way?
I considered it in preparing my testimony. Yeah.
Okay. And I apologize, Ms. Mullen, if you could just scroll up a line or two so we can see a little more. Paragraph 11. Yeah. So in paragraph 11 of Mr. Bush's rebuttal testimony, he talks about some documents, technical memoranda that have been published, subsequent to the 2000 biological opinions. You see that first one there is Broughton et al. If you could scroll down, Ms. Mullen, and we can just see the rest of those citations. So Broughton et al. 2005, 2006, 2007. Are you familiar with any of those documents?
Yeah, I believe I've looked at most of those documents in the past, though the contents of each is not readily on the tip of my tongue here.
I don't intend to quiz you on them. Did you rely on any of those documents in preparing your testimony?
Not specifically.
Okay, and then the next, Boughton and Goslin, 2006. Are you familiar with that document?
Yes.
And did you review that document in preparing your testimony?
I did.
And is that something you relied on then in informing your opinion that you're presenting here today?
It was considered, yes.
Okay. And you said that you did not refer to the recovery plan or rely on that in your testimony. I believe is what you said. Please correct me if that's not right.
I did not rely on that. That's correct.
Okay. And then there's some other materials that Mr. Bush references in his opinion that are relevant new information on steelhead relevant to the Santa Ynez River in this proceeding. He notes Hayes et al. 2008, 2011. Are you familiar with either of those documents?
Objection,
Yes.
argumentative. Objection, argumentative is the characterization of those as relevant to this particular proceeding.
Well, they're included in Mr. Bush's testimony, and I don't believe that you objected based on relevance to their being included in this testimony.
Just to be clear, my objection is based on the argumentative, is an argumentative objection that says these particular publications are relevant. I don't dispute that they're cited in his testimony. I'm objecting to the characterization of the question.
Ms. Beal, would it affect your question? I mean, you just dropped the descriptor as relevant. We can.
I mean, that's fine, but since they're here before us as part of this matter, I'm not understanding the objection as to relevance, but in any event, Mr. Mulder, did you rely on the Hayes reports?
On the Hayes report specifically?
Yeah.
Did I rely upon it? No.
Mm-hmm. In preparing your testimony?
No.
How about the Clemento et al. 2009?
Rely upon it? No, I don't believe I found information that pertinent to my testimony.
Okay, and the Boughton et al. 2015?
Same.
Okay, so do you disagree with Mr. Bush's opinion that these documents contain information relevant to considering the ongoing validity of the 2000 biological opinion?
Considering the validity of the ongoing 2000 biological opinion,
Objection, that misstates testimony.
It misstates Mr. Bush's testimony?
It appears to misstate Mr. Bush's testimony. I mean, he says these reports occurred. I don't know that he says, the 2000 opinion is no longer valid.
I believe he does say that.
Well, he doesn't seem to say it in this paragraph that's on the screen in front of us.
That might be true.
Does it need to be on the screen in front of us for me to ask the question?
No, it certainly doesn't. Well, no, and I don't mean to. I'm trying to think whether, and I was looking quickly whether I could quickly find a point. Let's maybe take a moment, Ms. Beal, if you'd like to orient us if there's another portion in Mr. Bush's testimony that we can reference here to provide a foundation for the question.
Okay. Well, let's put a pause on that question. I think it would be more efficient to finish looking at this paragraph so we don't have to jump around too much. Then I think we already discussed the 2023 5-year review for California Steelhead. You did not rely on that, correct?
Did I rely on that for my...
In preparing your testimony and your opinions?
No.
Okay. Do you disagree with the last statement in this paragraph where Mr. Bush says that reliance on the decades-old 2000 opinion is unsound and ignores the best available fishery science? Do you disagree with that statement?
I'm not sure the context. I'm sorry. The reliance on it for what? Reliance on the 2000 buyout for what?
For understanding adequate flows for steelhead below LSL Bridge.
Sorry, is that what he's referring to here?
Can we, I'm going to interject just momentarily. Ms. Mullen, can we scroll up to the rest of this paragraph? I know we looked at it before. I just want to see if there's more. No, he does not define it in this paragraph. All right, we can go back down to where we were. Thank you. So I think, Ms. Beal, maybe you can rephrase the question. Well,
well, and also I'll just object that we're getting into, undue cumulative testimony here in the sense that I don't think Mr. Mulder has testified that he relied solely on the 2000 opinion. He's indicated that he's relied on quite a wide variety of information informing his testimony and opinion. So I'm not sure what the relevance or the relative value of this line of questioning is with respect to Mr. Mulder.
I may be mistaken, Mr. Bivens, but did CCRB object to NIM's inclusion of the 2016 biological opinion and instead argue that the 2000 biological opinion is the relevant document for this? I believe the term governing has been used.
CCRB did object to the 2016 draft biological opinions inclusion, and I don't believe there's any dispute that document does not currently govern the operation of the Kachuma project.
I'm talking about the 2000 opinion.
Well, and I'm going to allow, let me cut this short because I am going to allow this line of questioning. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it in a way that's fair because Mr. Bush is not clear here about what sole reliance on the opinion for what purpose. Maybe the way to go get about this question is that Mr. Mulder you can qualify your statement as to what you think reliance on, if you think reliance on the 2000 opinion is sole reliance is appropriate and in what circumstances. But maybe Ms. Beal, can you try the question again with give Mr. Mulder room to limit his response?
Yes, and if we can, I'll just change it up a bit here in response to the issues raised and ask if we could go back up to PDF page 4, the bottom of that page, and then the top of the following page 5. So in paragraph 8, again, Mr. Mulder, this is Mr. Bush's rebuttal testimony. So if we could keep going just a little bit so we could see the top of the next page. And I acknowledge that this is referring to Mr. Gibson's testimony in particular, noting that Mr. Mulder only filed rebuttal testimony, so therefore we have not had an opportunity to rebut his testimony. Mr. Bush's rebuttal opinion is that the 2000 opinion for the Kachuma project should not be relied upon to inform an understanding of the potential effects of the Solvang's project on endangered steelhead or designated critical habitat. Do you see that part of this paragraph, Mr. Mulder?
I see it, yes.
Okay. Do you disagree with Mr. Bush's opinion?
Do I disagree with his opinion?
Do you disagree with his opinion about the 2000 opinion not being reliable?
Objection misstates Mr. Bush's testimony.
Well, that's the question. Do you disagree with Mr. Mulder? Do you disagree with the opinion expressed by Mr. Bush in this sentence, starting with generally the 2000 opinion?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand how the 2000 opinion forms any understanding of the potential effects of the project. I mean, the opinion is for a separate project. So if you're referring to, are you talking about the characterization of the habitat under the 2000 buyout?
I'm just asking if you agree with this statement or disagree with this statement. In your expert opinion as a biologist.
In my expert opinion, I would acknowledge that there has been additional information on the species in this river system that has been published since the 2000 buyout was put out, yes.
And is some of that information, those citations we were just going over in that other part of Mr. Bush's rebuttal, does that constitute some of the new information that you're referring to?
It does, yes.
But you didn't rely on that information in developing your opinion, correct?
I reviewed the information for contradictory evidence to my opinion about the quality and distribution of the habitat in the Luma River.
And in none of those citations, you found any such contradictory information, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Then I just have a few more questions. If we could kindly, Ms. Mullen, pull up Mr. Mulder's rebuttal testimony, which is CCRB 1, is that correct? And I'd just like to ask you a couple questions about table 1, which was, let's see, where was table 1? Table 1. Do you recall where table 1 is, Mr. Mulder? I had it up a second ago. No, I lost it. Oh, here it is. So that would be PDF page 10. Ah, thank you. So, Mr. Mulder, if we just start at the very top, kind of left corner, under Highway 154 under 2005 NS, could you tell us what NS means?
Yeah, NS means not surveyed.
Okay. In your testimony, you talk about this table. I believe your statement was that surveys were conducted in 15 out of 18 years, and Omicus were observed in the Avenue of Flags and Cadwell Reach in 5 of those years. Is that right?
That sounds correct, yeah.
Okay. And could you just explain where you're getting those numbers, 15 out of 18 years? So if we start spring and we go to Avenue of Flags, I see that there are it looks to me like no surveys in 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the 18 years. Is that what you see here too?
Yes, I see that.
And then if you go drop down to the next line for Cadwell, also 4 of the years had no surveys in those areas,
Yes.
correct? And if we go down to summer for Avenue of the Flags, it looks like I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years with no surveys. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then dropping below that for Cadwell, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, 5 years with no surveys. So how does that equal surveys being conducted in 15 out of 18 years? I'm just asking. I'm not understanding how you got those numbers.
Sure. I understand what you're saying. My characterization was the total number of years in which surveys were conducted across all reaches.
Okay. And when a survey was not conducted, are you assuming there were no fish present?
No, I'm not making any assumptions about presence or absence necessarily, though I would note that often surveys weren't conducted where water levels were too low to do a survey or water quality conditions were so poor. That was often the case for not doing a survey, in which case you would expect fish numbers to be pretty low.
And where would we find the information in the record to support the statement you just made of fish surveys not being conducted when fish were less likely to be present?
Statements
Is that
about,
information,
yeah,
is
so
that information included in your testimony here?
it is not.
Okay.
It can be found in the animal monitoring reports from Comb Fisheries Division.
I'm sorry.
The explanation for not surveyed is found in the annual monitoring reports from Comb Fisheries Division.
But you didn't include that information specifically in your testimony?
I did not.
Okay. So if we want to, let's focus. So if we can go down just to that bottom of this for a moment, but then unfortunately I'll ask you to go back up, Ms. Mullen. So if we look at the year type, so I'm starting at 2005. So we have wet, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, wet. And if we go back up, I believe that corresponds with 2005 to 2011. Yeah, is that correct? Are you following me there? That
Yes.
Generally that period was had more wet years.
Yes.
And then if we go just down to the very first row across, Highway 154, seems that there were a number of surveys that did not occur, but I see that there were fish present in 2010, 2011, and a lot in 2012. Is that correct?
It is.
And if you go Refugio, that to me looks like, relative to this chart, fair number of fish present that were detected between 2005 and 2011. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you go down below that to Alisol, also seems a fair number of fish in that time period.
Yes.
And then when you go down to Avenue of the Flags, so it looks like surveys were conducted in only 3 out of those 7 years. Is that correct?
Yes, that looks correct.
So those are wet years that were not surveyed in Spring Avenue of the Flags, right?
It appears so.
Okay. And then going down to Cadwell, same thing. It looks like 3 out of those 7 years had surveys.
It appears so.
And then we keep going down. I promise I'm not going all the way down the chart, but I'm interested in the summer numbers here. So for Highway 154, we only got 3 years of surveys, but it looks like a fair number of fish. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Objection, vague is the fair number of fish.
And then
I'm going to note the objection, but we can continue.
I mean, we can talk, I can describe each number, but I think Mr. Mulder knows, what I'm asking.
I think that's fair. I mean, understood. Please continue.
If we keep going down, then Refugio, looks like that area was surveyed every year. and we see fish,
Yes.
correct? And then Alisal, again, surveyed every year. We have, I guess I can't say for a number, but it looks like there are more than a few fish that were noted.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then for Avenue of the Flags, it looks like during those years where there were fish located in other areas, that there was only 2 surveys conducted in that time period, Avenue of the Flags. Is that right?
It appears so.
And then down to Cadwell, also 2 surveys. So would you say that a survey conducted in 2 out of 7 years would provide a representative sample of the number of fish that might generally be present?
It is just a snapshot.
Snapshot. Okay. Thank you. I'm almost done here. If we could go to table 2, and I believe that is PDF page 11. I hope. Yes. So could you explain what table 2 is showing us here?
Sure. This is observations of Omicus reds by reach by year for the various survey reaches for the years 2008 through 2022.
Okay. And in paragraph 15, you stated that these red spawning surveys have been conducted consistently since 2008 in the main stem between Alisal Bridge and Bradbury Dam. Is that your correct testimony?
Yes.
Okay. So when you say consistently, how many times per year do you consider to be a consistent survey? Is that 1 survey per year, more than 1?
I don't know that I tried to characterize consistent. I simply meant that they've been conducted annually. So consistently, and that they've been conducted annually.
And is it correct that NS, as used in this table, also means no survey was conducted?
It is.
So for example, if we go down to this row that is labeled Alisal, and starting in 2008, number 1, what does that indicate?
That they observed 1 red. Is that what you're looking at? Or the NS one? I'm sorry. Repeat the question for me.
Yeah, 2008 Alisal.
Yes.
What does that indicate?
There's a number 1 there, which indicates they observed 1 red.
Okay. And then in 2009?
In Alisal?
Yeah, same row. I'm going to go across.
Yeah, so that has an NS with the note 2 in it.
Mm-hmm. So not surveyed?
Not surveyed, apparently due to low flow, dry conditions, or high turbidity.
Okay. And then I see 0, 0, 0, 0, and then no survey, no survey, no survey, no survey. And then 0, no survey, no survey, no survey, no survey. So is it your professional opinion that these surveys at Alisal were conducted consistently between 2008 and 2022?
It's my opinion that they were attempted consistently, but conditions precluded the actual observations.
So is that consistent with your testimony that says surveys have been conducted consistently since 2008?
I believe so. I mean, they went to the site to conduct the survey. They conducted observations to the best of their ability, but they weren't able to fully see the bottom. Thus, I guess you would not count it as a survey.
So when you're saying that the surveys have been conducted consistently, should we read that surveys have been attempted to be conducted every year? Would that be a more accurate?
I think that's a fair characterization.
Okay. Are you familiar with the National Marine Fisheries Service RED survey protocol?
I have reviewed that, but it has been quite some time, I would admit.
Did you apply those protocols, or do you know whether those protocols were followed in conducting the surveys that you cite?
I would have to review the COMB protocols for red surveys. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay. I believe, if you'll just bear with me one moment, I think that is all of my questions. Yes, I'm finished. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. And I believe we have Ms. Hall. Do you have questions for Mr. Mulder?
I do. Thank you.
Ms.
Please.
Kenzie, before we move to Ms. Hall, can I request a short break?
A break? Yes, we can do that. Let's go ahead and do a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 2:48.
And one other
Sure.
request. The two CDFW cross exhibits, I think they were 125, 126. I don't believe they've been moved over to where they're publicly accessible. So
Yes,
I'd
we're
ask that we
attempting to do that because we had them open. We couldn't move them anyway.
Understood.
We had a little, but they should be available as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you back here at 2:48. All right, I see you, Ms. Hall. Once we have, there's Mr. Bivens, and once we have Mr. Mulder back, we can get started. There we go. All right, Ms. Hall, please go ahead with your questions for Mr. Mulder.
Great. Good afternoon, Mr. Mulder. I'm Maggie Hall on behalf of California Trout. So just a handful of questions for you. So first of all, you point out that Dr. Tresh used a 1.0 foot RCT depth to achieve book and depths of 0.8 for adult migration in the River Institute report, and then uses an RCT depth of 1.59 feet in his direct testimony, correct?
Yes.
And your testimony states at paragraph 20 that the River Institute report acknowledges that an adult steelhead migration at this minimum depth of 0.8 foot would minimize its physical stress and inefficient energy expenditure. Is that right?
Yes.
And is it correct that you peer reviewed the 2014 River Institute report?
I reviewed it, yes.
And so you're aware that Dr. Tresh concluded on page 20 of that report that an adult steelhead's migration rate would likely still be largely affected at this minimum depth of 0.08 feet in the San Ynez River mainstem relative to a rate of an adult that might be capable under ideal conditions. Are you familiar with that?
I recall that statement, yes.
So the comparison of ideal conditions versus the minimum depth.
Sure.
So Dr. Tresh concluded that 1 foot RCT depth to achieve 0.8 foot bookended was quote minimum and not therefore ideal, and would adversely affect the migration rate compared to those under ideal conditions. Is that right?
That sounds like an accurate representation of his statement.
And is it also possible, in your opinion, that in studying steelhead migration during the intervening 9 years since Dr. Tresh published this report, he may learn more about migration and then alter his original recommendation?
I couldn't speculate on that.
Okay, thank you. Shifting gears a bit, your proposed alternative recommendation, so that's based on the WRO of 2019-0148 and on Omicus being present in the avenue of flags and Cadwell reaches. Is that right?
It is a suggestion, yes.
So are you aware that the table 2 flows in the water rights order 0148 are not dependent on the presence of Omicus?
I am.
And most of the area downstream from Alisal is off limits to surveys due to lack of landowner permission, correct?
I don't know the exact percentage in terms of the word most, but I know that there is some private property restriction, yes.
So it's possible that steelhead could be present between the avenue flags and Cadwell reaches, and that would not be known. Is that right?
I suppose it is within the realm of possibility in certain year types, yes.
And under your alternative, steelhead would have to be present in both the Cadwell and avenue flag reaches in order for diversions to be stopped. Is that right?
I don't believe I used the word both, or if I did not mean to. I meant one or the other, yes.
Sorry, could you please repeat that?
You asked me if steelhead needed to be present in both the Cadwell and avenue and flags reaches. If I don't believe that was my intention, it was either or, not both.
Understood. So under your alternative, diversions could continue if Omicus were present between but not in those reaches. Is that right?
Mike, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Well, I think maybe it'd be helpful to pull up your testimony on this point. So CCRB 14, I believe this would be at 9. I just want to confirm the point about whether the testimony indicates it would be both reaches. So Ms. Mueller, could you please pull up CCRB 14?
Yes, I see what you're referring to, and my intention there was perhaps an error in wording, or would be what I would suggest, not and in that last sentence there.
Okay, understood. Okay, let's see, switching gears a bit, in your slide 3, last bullet point, you cite to the 2005, correct?
I do.
And the 2019 water rights order states that Mr. Keegan testified that water boards, adopted table 2 flows would improve the quantity and quality of rearing, glide, and pool habitat downstream from us, correct?
Yes.
And the 2000 buyout obviously predates the 2019 table 2 flows, right?
It does.
So the table 2 flows, which includes 5 to 48 CFS at Alisol, could provide more water downstream from Alisol, which the 2000 buyout didn't consider. Is that right?
It could.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions here. In your slide 6 regarding observations of steelhead, you show 40 Omicus observed in the Cadwell Reach downstream from Alisol in the fall of 2011 and 17 in the spring of 2012. Is that right?
I can look at my testimony here and confirm that. That appears correct.
Thank you. And Miss Mullen, could you please pull up Hal Trout 11? At PDF pages 42 to 43. The 2012 annual monitoring summary. So in 2012, in the reach just upstream of the Cadwell Reach, each of 14 habitats surveyed contained Omicus, totaling 174 young of the year, 12 adults up to 18 inches, and indicating spawning, according to a Kachuma biologist. Is that right?
It does say that.
And your slide 6 omits these fish in the reaches immediately downstream from the Cadwell Reach and additional fish in the reach upstream. Is that right?
It does not include this. That is correct.
And in fact, in the spring of 2012, there were 173 Omicus documented in the Highway 154 reach. Is that right? I believe that's in your testimony.
That appears correct.
So in 2012, there were 186 in the reach downstream of Cadwell, but your slide 6 omits that fact. Is that right?
This is true.
And then there were another 155 Omicus consisting of mostly young of the year found in the Sweeney Road to Robinson Bridge below Alisol in 2012, which indicates successful spawning and rearing below Alisol. Does your slide 6 omit that as well?
Does not include that area in slide 6.
And then one more question on the annual monitoring summaries. In 2020, there were another 56 Omicus found in that reach. Did your slide 6 omit those as well?
No, I only included the Avenue of Flags and Cadwell reaches.
Thank you. Let's see. One more short question. So on your slide 6 again, so you show 40 Omicus observed in Cadwell downstream from Alisol in the fall of 2011, right?
Yes.
And then in your slide 6, there were 12 Omicus observed in Cadwell in spring 2011, 24 in the summer, and 40 in the fall.
That looks correct.
So does this show that the fish survived from the spring all the way until the fall downstream from Alisol? And in fact, the numbers of fish seen increased from spring until the fall?
So the observations showed more fish observed in the fall in that reach, yes.
Thank you. And one last point. So If you could please pull up Caltrout 8 at PDF 103. This one. So the legend of this map shows where snorkel access was granted for snorkel surveys. So from Bradbury Dam down to Solvang, most of the area was surveyed, correct? In those red and brown and pink colors.
It appears so, yeah.
But from Solvang down to Lompoc, most of the river in the thin blue line was not surveyed, right?
That appears correct from this figure.
And to confirm, regarding your slide 6, none of the numbers represent fish in the areas that were not surveyed. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and my final question is if you could pull up Caltrap 36, at page 304, the Southern California Steelhead Recovery Plan. So the second and third sentences here of this first paragraph, starting with low gradient. So I just wanted to verify whether you agree or disagree with these couple of sentences here about low gradient main stem habitats, such as the trunks of the San Ynez, Ventura, Santa Clara, Santa Margarita, San Luis Rey, and San Dieguito River may also have once supported rapid growth of juveniles, particularly if breaches received enough sunlight to support primary productivity, but artesian flows or other groundwater inputs kept water cool in the summer. Most mainstem habitats have now been highly altered by agricultural clearing and groundwater pumping, so an effort to determine their potential to contribute to steelhead recovery would require a focused effort. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I would agree, particularly with the word may.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. I believe that completes cross-examination. That I went down my list and it completes cross-examination of Mr. Mulder. But before I go back to you, Mr. Bivens, did I miss anyone? I didn't check all the boxes. Okay. Mr. Bivens, do you have redirect for Mr. Mulder based on the questions?
Just 2 questions for Mr. Mulder, ask Kenzie. Mr. Mulder, did you rely solely on the 2000 biological opinion in developing your testimony?
No.
And to the best of your knowledge, is the Kachuma project operated in accordance with the 2016 draft biological opinion?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
I'm sorry, Mr.
I'm
Mulder.
sorry, with which, maybe I misheard you. Please repeat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, does, to the best of your knowledge, is the Kachuma project operated in accordance with the 2016 draft biological opinion?
The 2016 draft, no, it does not.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Based on that very limited redirect, Mr. Kim, do you have any follow-up questions for Mr. Mulder?
No follow-up questions.
Thank you. And Ms. Germanario, do you have any follow-up questions?
No questions.
Ms. Beal? You're on mute still.
Was on double mute.
Yeah.
Being careful. Mr. Mulder, to your knowledge, have some elements of the 2016 reasonable and prudent alternative been implemented at the Kachuma project?
Thinking, give me a moment. The 2016 draft biop RPAs, have any of them been implemented at the Kachuma project?
In whole or in part? If you don't know, that's fair as well.
I don't believe so, but I'd have to review the what is a pretty good list of RPAs there. I don't believe they have them.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. And Ms. Hall, do you have any follow-up questions?
I do not, thank you.
I'm sorry, did you say you do or you do not?
I said I do not, thank
I
you.
do not, thank you. Great. I think with that, we have completed this part of the process. I will thank you, Mr. Mulder. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I really appreciate the time to join us, and your testimony today is very helpful. And you are excused for the afternoon. Thank you. And with that, I will turn to Mr. Bivens. Are you prepared to call, is it Van Linden? Mr.
Yes,
Van
Brian,
Linden? That's
Mr.
correct
Brian Van
pronunciation.
Linden, yes.
Great.
We are prepared to call him. I
Wonderful.
believe he is. There he is. Brian, if you could bring your camera on and.
Yes, I'm ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Van Linden. Thank you for joining us. If you would please raise your right hand and I will administer the oath. Mr. Van Linden, do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. You may proceed, Mr. Bivens.
Yeah, Mr. Van Linden, is Exhibit CCRB 15 a true and correct copy of your written testimony?
Yes, it is.
And are there any minor clarifications or corrections you'd like to make to that testimony?
Yes, I did have one minor clarification. So in paragraph 8 on line 25 through 27, I stated that downstream users along the San Ynez River accumulate credits in the above narrows and below narrows accounts based on an estimate of percolation impaired by reclamation's impoundment of surface water in Lake Cachuma. The clarification that I'd like to make is that this statement is true for the below narrows account, but for the above narrows account, the credits are actually accumulated based on an estimate of stored inflow that occurs on days when there's no live stream in the Santa Ynez River. So that was an omission. However, I don't think that affects the argument that I'm making in paragraph 8.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van Linden. And would you please summarize your testimony for the hearing officer?
Yes. So just to introduce myself, I'm a registered civil engineer in California with over 20 years of experience. Currently, I work as a senior project manager at Woodard & Curran. I have a bachelor's of science in civil engineering and a master's of science in civil and environmental engineering from UC Davis. I have experience managing multi-objective water resources management projects throughout California. This includes projects that involve the development and application of water resources and river system models. I'm also familiar with the operations of the Santa Ynez River and the Cachuma project through my work as a consultant. And that includes application of the riverware model that is currently used in the water system. The testimony that I'm providing today is provided in response to the written testimony of Mr. Nicely, which is Exhibit Solvang 5, and the supporting exhibits that he references that were prepared by Stetson engineers, technical memoranda number 1 and number 6. Those are exhibits Solvang 69 and 74. In particular, I'm responding to the impact analysis that was performed using the Santa Ynez River hydrology model as described in Tech Memo number 6 and referenced by Mr. Nicely. In my opinion, Mr. Nicely's testimony doesn't provide sufficient information to conclude that the Solvang project would not result in a reduction of water available for Cachuma project member units. And in my testimony, I laid out 5 main points to support this assertion. First, Mr. Nicely relies on Stetson Memoranda number 1 and number 6. However, those documents do not provide the specific criteria that were changed in the Santa Ynez River hydrology model to simulate the effects of the Solvang project. And because of that, it was not really possible to replicate that same methodology in the current version of the model. Second, Mr. Nicely argues, quote, surface flow conditions and management of the Santa Ynez River during the period analyzed by the Stetson analysis are similar to more recent conditions, and current management of the river such that the Stetson analysis can be applied to the River Wells project, end quote. However, this ignores that there's important changes that have occurred in management of the river since 2011. Most importantly, the Water Right Order 2019-148 imposed additional target fish flows in wet and above normal years. In addition, the minimum fish releases from Bradbury Dam to meet those target fish flows have additionally increased due to increases in estimated losses that reclamation develops. And they document these estimated losses in their Term 27 annual compliance reports. GSI did prepare 2 memos that discuss the change conditions in kind of a qualitative way in Solvang 20 and Solvang 21. However, neither of these memos really described or analyzed in detail how the Kachuma project operations would change with the Solvang project under the current operational and regulatory conditions that exist on the river. I believe that Solvang should evaluate its project under these current regulatory conditions, and particularly they should be looking at the effects that would be accruing during drier years, since those are the years when Solvang has indicated that they are going to be having the greatest increase in pumping, and also when increased water right releases are most likely to occur. Third, the Stetson analysis did not show how much of the changes caused by the Solvang project would increase the accumulation of the above narrows and below narrows account credits under the terms of Water Right Order 8918. So just to make clear kind of what we're talking about there. So the Water Right Order says that they need to make estimates of dewatered storage for each of these accounts based on groundwater level measurements that are taken downstream of Lake Kachuma above and below the narrows. Because I would expect that the Solvang project will result in lower groundwater level measurements in the vicinity of their project, this will likely cause the dewater storage estimate that results from these measurements to go up. And the Water Right Order has a limit in it that basically says that the total accumulation of credits in these above narrows and below narrows accounts cannot go above the total level of dewater storage. So if the project causes the amount of dewater storage to go up, this will also allow for greater accumulation into these above narrow and below narrow accounts. And I would expect that this in turn would lead to less water being available for delivery to the Kachuma project member units. So my fourth point is that Mr. Nicely references a Stetson estimate that the Solvang project will result in an increase in water rights releases of about 183 acre-feet per year. Mr. Nicely states that this increase is, quote, insignificant when compared to the total volume of releases, end quote. However, Mr. Nicely does not attempt to estimate the cost of this water or the replacement cost of this water for other users on the river. I have also not evaluated the replacement cost of procuring water for Kachuma project member units to make up for the loss of water. However, I did look at Mr. Vanderlinden's testimony, and he provided some estimates for replacement costs for some similar types of water that would likely be available to the Kachuma project member units. And when I applied those replacement costs to the 183 acre-foot estimate, I came up with a range of $128,000 to $1.1 million per year in potential replacement costs due to the 183 acre-feet per year of additional releases. My fifth point is that Mr. Nicely suggests that the Solvang project could have some impacts on the amount of water available to Kachuma project member units in his testimony, but he doesn't include a proposal for how to avoid such impacts. In my testimony, I offered up a couple of possible suggestions about what could be done, including potentially reducing the allowable diversion from Solvang project during dry years, or providing replacement water supplies to Kachuma project's member units. However, I believe that it's incumbent on the city of Solvang to propose a solution for avoiding these impacts. So I did not lay out a detailed proposal. Just in conclusion, the failure of Mr. Nicely to appropriately analyze and quantify these impacts and to propose a solution for avoiding them means that it's difficult for me to conclude that the project will not reduce the amount of water available for use by the Kachuma project member units. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Linden. With that, I will turn to Solvang. Ms. O'Sullivan, do you have questions for Mr. Van Linden?
I do, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Okay, and before I get started, Ms. Mullen, if we could have, let's see, AHO, again, not all of these exhibits, I might not need to use all of them, but just have them handy. AHO 47 available, Solvang 189, CCRB 15. Solvang 69, Solvang 74. I think that's it. Oh, excuse me, and one more, Solvang 17, please. Thank you. If we could just have those ready. All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Van Linden. Thank you for taking questions with me today.
My pleasure.
All right. So if we could pull up your CCRB 15, page 2, please, Ms. Mullen. And I'm looking for paragraph 3, lines 23 through 25, please. Thank you. And Mr. Van Linden, do you see where your testimony states that reclamation diverts and stores water at the Kachuma project and supplies water to the Kachuma project member units pursuant to permit 11308, application 11331, and permit 11301, application 11332?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So the Bureau of Reclamation is actually the permittee for those permits for the Kachuma project, right?
Yes, I
Okay,
believe.
not CCRB?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and not any of CCRB member units?
Yes.
Okay, and CCRB and its member units don't contract directly with Reclamation, correct?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, they receive water from the Kachuma project through a contract with the Santa Barbara County Water Agency, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the Santa Barbara County Water Agency is the entity that actually contracts with the Bureau of Reclamation, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so CCRB itself doesn't hold water rights in the San Ynez River, right?
Objection, Vegas to water rights.
I'll rephrase. CCRB does not hold a water right permit in the San Ynez River, correct?
So I believe the permits related to the Kachuma project are held by Reclamation.
Okay. And Reclamation as permittee for the Kachuma project is not a party to these proceedings, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, if we could go to, oh, actually, we can still see it. So Mr. Van Linden, if I could direct you to lines 21 and 20 through 23 of your testimony that you can see here, where you say, for the purposes of my testimony, I assume that the term injury as used in the amended hearing notice encompasses reductions in water available for use by the Kachuma project member units caused by Solvang's proposed changes to its water rights. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and that's your testimony still, correct?
Yes. So, I'm not an attorney, so as a technical expert, the lens that I'm looking at is how it may affect the water available to the Kachuma project member units.
Okay, so your conclusions are based on that assumption that injury includes reductions of water available to Kachuma project members, correct?
That is the type of injury that I'm looking at, yes.
Okay. And you're not making any legal conclusions about what actually constitutes injury to other water users, correct?
Yeah, in fact, I think I say that at the end of this paragraph.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to another line of questioning here. So, Mr. Van Linden, you're aware that the state board approved reclamation's permits for the Kachuma project in decision 886, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Mullen, if we could pull up Solvang 189, please. And first, I just want to look at the top here. You see that it's titled that this is decision 886. If you see right underneath the line there, it says decision 886, and that it's titled in the matter of applications 11331 and 11332 by the United States of America, Department of Interior, Bureau of Reclamation, correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
I appreciate there's a few other applications listed there, but we're focused on those first two. Okay, and you're aware that reclamation's permits were approved subject to several conditions, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, if we could go to PDF page 33, please. And Mr. Van Linden, I'll represent to you that we're in the section of the order that relates to the conditions of the project. If Ms. Mullen, if we could scroll down so that paragraph number 11 is visible. Okay, do you see that, Mr. Van Linden? Paragraph 11 there.
I see that paragraph 11 is up on the screen, yes.
Okay, and you're familiar that this is what's called condition 11 of the reclamation's Kachuma project permit, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you see that, I'm going to read it to you in part, but you see that it says that permittee shall release water to the San Ynez River channel from the Kachuma Reservoir in such amounts and at such times and rates as will be sufficient, together with inflow from the downstream tributary sources. And now I'm going to skip a little bit. Sufficient to maintain percolation of water from the stream channel as such percolation would occur from unregulated flow in order that operation of the project shall not reduce natural recharge of groundwater from the San Ynez River. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so looking at this condition, reclamation is required to release water sufficient to recharge the underflow of the San Ynez River, right?
Up to the amount that would have percolated from unregulated flow. Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, if we could also go to AHO Exhibit 1, which I apologize, I omitted that from my list of exhibits to have at the ready, but that's where I'd like to go next. Excuse me. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. If we could, well, we can stay right there. Actually, that's great for starters. So, Mr. Van Linden, do you see that this is decision 1338?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and you see that it's titled in the matter of application 22423 of Solvang Municipal Improvement District to appropriate from the San Ynez River underflow?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll assert to you that the Solvang Municipal Improvement District is the city's predecessor in interest under its permit. So this is the board decision approving the city's water rights permit.
Okay.
Okay, and specifically, Ms. Mullen, if we could go to page 7. Okay. And I'll represent to you, Mr. Van Linden, that this order about the city's permit is discussing the language that we just reviewed in decision 886.
Okay.
Okay. And so you can, if we can scroll down and maybe zoom out a little bit, Ms. Mullen, thank you, because I'm trying to show that paragraph that starts with these references clearly and show it kind of in full if possible. Okay. We'll start with that. So starting with the first, this is one very long sentence that makes up an entire paragraph, Mr. Van Linden. So just note that. So at first that it starts with, these references clearly indicate the board concluded that the Bureau had in effect agreed to release that portion of the unregulated flow required to satisfy vested rights to deliver from the surface flow, plus all unregulated flow that will percolate, which will progressively increase with increased use of groundwater for future development in the watershed. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next clause states that operation of the Kachuma project by the Bureau as intended will provide a groundwater supply sufficient to permit additional diversions from groundwater for future development of the watershed. Do you also see that language?
Yes, I would assume that that's pursuant to the unregulated flow limitation from the previous paragraph.
Okay, but you see that language?
Yes.
Okay. And then going down a little bit farther, do you see where it starts in the public interest?
No.
You gotta skip a clause, I think. Let's see. Maybe we need to scroll down. Yes, it's kind of the fourth line up in the middle. In the public interest.
Yes, I see that.
Okay. And that language says in the public interest, release is sufficient to maintain percolation from the stream channel as would occur from unregulated flow with whatever groundwater extractions are made for present and future needs. And then Ms. Mullen, if you don't mind, it continues briefly onto page 8. In the watershed. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Ms. Mullen, if we could have the last paragraph on page 8 visible. Okay. Yes, thank you. So, I'm sorry, it's actually the last paragraph before section 8 on page 8, starting with considering decision 886. Do you see that, Mr. Van Linden?
Yes.
Okay, and that paragraph says, considering decision 886, including the order as a whole, it is concluded that the board intended to grant permits for the Kachuma project subject to all diversions supplied by percolation from the unregulated flow of the Santa Ynez River for use in the watershed without regard to the basis of right for such diversions. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Mullen, we can take that down, exhibit down. Thank you very much. So considering all of the language that we just reviewed from those two orders, from that order on the city's project, the board concluded that reclamation's permits issued under decision 886 would be subject to diversions supplied by percolation, excuse me, from the unregulated flow of the Santa Ynez River, right?
Yes.
Take your time, Ms. O'Sullivan.
I apologize. I'm recovering from a case of the daycare sickness myself, that I know Mr. Bivens got the same thing. And it crops up periodically as coughing, so apologies for that. So thank you, Mr. Van Linden. And the board also concluded, based on looking at the language we just looked at, the board also concluded that reclamation's permits are subject to future needs in the watershed, correct?
As limited by percolation from unregulated flows, yes.
Okay, thank you. And the board's decision to approve the city's application was based on this understanding of reclamation's permits, correct?
Which city application are you talking
The
about?
city of Solvang's application that we were just looking at,
The-
decision.
the original city's application?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're aware that the board's interpretation of decision 886 so the interpretation of 886 that we just reviewed, reviewed in decision 1338, you're aware that that was affirmed in a subsequent decision 1486?
Objection calls for a legal opinion as to affirmed.
To your knowledge, I'll modify the question, to your knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't offer a legal opinion on that, but yeah, I guess that's my understanding.
Okay. And you're also aware that the board's interpretation of decision 886 in 1338, so the same question basically with respect to, was also affirmed in order 7916.
Same objection, but go ahead.
Understood.
To his knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you're aware that the city's current permit, are in existence today. So not the city's request for, petition for change, but its current permit allows for a maximum diversion of 3,600 acre feet, right?
Objection calls for a legal opinion.
Maybe you can qualify that. I would like to hear an answer to this question, but maybe Ms. O'Sullivan, can you qualify that the way you phrased the question?
So yeah, you're aware that the city's current permit states that the maximum annual diversion allowed under the permit is 3,600 acre feet per year.
Yes, I suppose that's right. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And you're aware that the city in its current petition for change is only requesting 1,368 acre feet, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to another line of questioning. In your testimony, you state that the specific criteria that were changed in the San Ynez River hydrologic model to assess the city's project were not identified in Stetson Tech Memo 1 or 6, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, if we could pull up Solvang 69, please. Just want to go through this with you, Mr. Van Linden. Understand the basis for that statement. Okay, if we can scroll so we can see some sort of heading of some kind. Yes, thank you. Maybe we can just go to the second page. That's perfect. Thank you. So Mr. Van Linden, you recognize this as Solvang Tech Memo number 1, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, I coughed. Was that a yes?
Yes, that's
Thank
Solvang.
you.
Yes.
Thank you. And Ms. Mullen, if we could go to PDF page 3 and have section 2 visible. And so Mr. Van Linden, this section, I believe you're familiar with it, but it's discussing the San Ynez River hydrologic model, correct?
It provides a high-level introduction to it, yes.
Okay, and I want to, if hopefully it's big enough for you, but if we could look at the second sentence in that section, it states that the analysis for the additional city of Solvang river well pumping use, excuse me, uses the same programming model, logic, and assumptions as these previous studies. Do you see that?
I do.
And you see that there's previous studies listed in the first sentence of this section, correct?
Yeah, none of those studies will tell me how the city of Solvang's project was implemented in the model, though.
Okay, but you see that the language that the same model, programming model, logic, and assumptions from these previous studies was used, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last full sentence states that all 12 of the alternatives analyzed in this memorandum, all of the original flow inputs are kept the same with the various combination of changes in the City of Solvang river well pumping, fish flow operations, and surcharging as shown in table 1. Do you see that language there at the end?
Yes.
Last sentence? Okay. And if we could just go to PDF page 4, Ms. Mullen, and have table 1 visible. And so this is the table that was referred to in the text we were just reviewing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and this depicts the various combinations of city well pumping that were analyzed, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so we have the original flow inputs from the prior studies, correct?
Yes.
And we have the new city pumping at various levels, correct?
Yes, but this
Okay.
the information
Thank
is
you.
does not provide enough information for me to replicate the results shown for these alternatives.
Okay. Let's go to Stetson Tech Memo 6. Ms. Mullen, if we could pull up Solvang 74, please. And same thing, if we can go to the second page, I think that has the title of the report. And so, Mr. Van Linden, you recognize this as Stetson Tech Memo 6, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and if we could, Ms. Mullen, if we could go to PDF page 10, please, and have section 4 visible. And again, Mr. Van Linden, this is the section discussing the San Ynez River hydrology model for this report, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in the second paragraph, the first sentence, give you a second to get there. And actually, like, I'm counting, maybe I didn't count this right, but I was counting, it's actually the last paragraph visible here. Let's put it that way. I was sort of counting the first thing with the bullets as all one paragraph, but it starts with please refer to. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so it says please refer to technical memorandum number 1 for detailed discussion of the San Ynez River hydraulic model utilized in this analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and the second sentence says the analysis for the additional City of Solvang river well pumping used the same programming model, logic, and assumptions as these previous studies, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then the if we could scroll down a little bit, Ms. Mullen, so you can see that last paragraph. And if you could look at the second sentence in the last paragraph, starting with table 3, it says table 3 shows the monthly volume of Solvang pumping for the various alternatives in the modeling analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Mullen, if we could go to PDF page 11. Oh, I'm trying to see table 3, so maybe it's 12. I apologize. I think it's just very shortly after here. Yes, and if possible to reorient that, I think that would be helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, and if we could just have the top visible so we can see that it is table 3. Thank you. And so, Mr. Van Linden, you see that this is the table 3 that we were just that was just referred to in the text that we just looked at, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that again depicts the monthly volumes for the various monthly diversion volumes for the various alternatives that were modeled in the study, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
So
thank you. All right, we can take that down, Ms. Mullen. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving to another part of your testimony, you talk about this 183 acre feet water rights release change, that number in your testimony, right?
Yes.
Okay, and your testimony assumes that 183 acre feet of changes in water rights releases equals 180 acre feet decrease in project deliveries to member units, right?
That's not correct. I assume that it is, well, if you have an increase in release in water rights releases, you either will need to reduce storage in the reservoir or to reduce the deliveries to project users. So either case, it would be a negative impact on the overall supply available to them.
So let me clarify. When you're calculating the cost for 180 acre, for the cost to Kachuma member units in your testimony, you multiplied 183 acre feet by whatever price unit you used, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And you use that as a cost to member units, correct?
Yes. I mean, in that
Okay.
case, I was commenting on Mr. Nicely's opinion that 183 acre feet was insignificant.
Okay. But again, you use that number to calculate costs to Kachuma project members, correct?
Potential costs, because like I mentioned, if you have an increase in releases, it's going to result either in a reduction in storage or a reduction in diversion to the.
So you would agree that the downstream pumping, water rights releases, and Kachuma project water deliveries, those are all indirectly related, right?
Can you sit?
Put another, I can give you an example. So 1 acre foot of diversion of pumping doesn't equal 1 acre foot of water releases and 1 acre foot of project change in project delivery.
I guess I would say that 1 acre foot release from the reservoir as a water right release does directly result in 1 acre foot less water available in the reservoir, either keep in storage or for diversion.
Okay. Let's explore that. Ms. Mullen, if we could bring up Solvang 74 again, please. And while she's doing that, Mr. Van Linden, in your summary, you acknowledged that the above narrows account is dependent on the amount of inflow into the Kachuma reservoir, correct?
Yes.
That's one factor that goes into that accounting.
Yes.
Okay, and another factor is the amount of dewatered storage, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, if we could go to PDF page 24, have table 17 visible. Yeah, we might need to go around the clock, so to speak, to get that upright. Yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Mullen. Okay, so again, Mr. Van Linden, we're looking at tech memo number 6, which you're familiar with. And do you see this as table 17 titled Impacts to Water Rights Releases for Water Years 1918 to 1993, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you see that the bottom row is labeled GW5, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that is an alternative that was evaluated that models Solvang pumping 2,400 acre feet per year downstream of the LSL bridge, correct?
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay. And you also see GW4, which is correct? You see that row just above? Okay. And that's an alternative for Solvang pumping 1,053 acre feet upstream of the LSL bridge, right?
I'm not sure that I guess I'm not sure if I know the exact location. All right, so you're saying all 2,400 is downstream and all 1,053 is upstream. I'm not sure if that's correct.
Yes, let's see. I do have a, Ms. Mullen, if we could go to page 3 briefly. So table 1 is visible. I think this will help Mr. Van Linden. So we're all on the same page. Okay. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I see that here now. So yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. And now I have to find my place again. Okay. So if we could go back to where we were, so Mr. Van Linden, just to be clear, you agree that the alternative 5 is the wells are all downstream of Alisal Bridge, and all the other alternatives, the wells are located upstream of the Alisal Bridge, but with various pumping amounts, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Ms. Mulder, if we could go to PDF page 24 again, please, with table 17. Thank you. Okay, so as we just to briefly recap, we looked at 5, which is 2,400 acre feet downstream, and 4, which is 1,053 acre feet upstream. And if you look at the rightmost column, Mr. Van Linden, do you see the 183 at the bottom there?
Yes.
Okay, and that column is titled Increase, Decrease in Water Rights 89 WR 8918 releases with GW4, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this column is showing you the difference in water rights releases comparing GW4 as the baseline, so 1,153 acre feet diversion to a 2,400 acre foot diversion downstream, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's where that 183 acre foot number that we've been talking about comes from, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. That was foundation just to get us all on the same page here. So if we could go, Ms. Mullen, now to PDF page 14, so table 4 is visible. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Van Linden, you see that this is table 4, and it's titled Surface Water Budget for Lake Cachuma, right?
Yes.
Okay, and this table's in acre feet per year, right?
Yes.
Okay, and do you see how the 2 columns on the right are labeled GW4 and GW5?
Yes.
Okay, and these are the same alternatives that we were just comparing in table 17 with respect to water rights releases, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and in the middle of table 4, do you see the row titled Project Deliveries, No Tunnel?
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Mullen, if we could just scroll briefly down so the notes of the table are visible, and then we can go back up. I just want to, you see note 3 that the no tunnel means that it doesn't include the infiltration from the tunnel in these numbers. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that. That's not super relevant, but just so we're all not wondering it while we're going. So Ms. Mullen, if we could scroll back up again, please, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. So looking at that project deliveries row.
Hang on 1 second. Sorry, Mr. Van Linden, where have you got? There it is.
I had to close my door. I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Bivens. The view I have, I only see who's talking. So I appreciate on my laptop, it's quite small. So thank you. I do want him present.
I thought you might.
All right, Mr. Van Linden, now that you're back, so we were looking at the row titled Project Deliveries, No Tunnel. Are you with me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. And just following this row over to the column for alternative 4 with the 1,053 acre feet diversion, project deliveries are listed at 23,053 acre feet, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and project deliveries for alternative GW5 are listed at 23,045 acre feet, right?
Yes.
And the difference between those two numbers is 8 acre feet, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so to summarize, when there's 183 acre foot change in water rights releases, that resulted in only 8 acre foot change in project deliveries to member units, correct?
That depends on the assumptions that are used in the model. And like I mentioned before, they did not provide information on what assumptions that they actually used in this modeling analysis.
Okay, but in these results, it shows that a change of 183 acre feet in change in water rights releases and only 8 acre-feet change in project deliveries, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the sustained yield is the sustained annual yield for the Kachuma project member units is 25,714 acre feet, right?
Yes.
Okay, so 8 acre feet is less than 0.1% of that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And just looking back to table 4, do you see the column with GW1 there? It's kind of the first column of results.
Yes.
Okay, and from the top bolded part, we can see that GW1 is modeling City of Solvang pumping of 600 acre feet per year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and again, that diversion would be upstream of the Alisal Bridge, right?
Yes.
Okay. And looking at the project deliveries row again, for GW1, it says that the project deliveries were found to be 23,045 acre feet, correct?
You said
Oh, I'm
GW.
sorry. Sorry, it's 23,069 acre feet, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was reading the wrong line. Apologies. And then GW5 is 23,045 acre feet, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so the difference between those two numbers is only 24 acre feet, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the change between a diversion of 2,400 acre feet downstream of Alisal Bridge, or excuse me, the change of diversion from 600 acre feet by the city upstream of Alisal Bridge to 2,400 acre feet downstream of Alisal Bridge only resulted in this model, these modeling results in 24 acre feet difference in Kachuma project deliveries, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And that would still be less than 0.1% of the total sustained annual yield for the Kachuma project, correct?
I suppose that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And so again, these numbers we're comparing to a 2,400 acre foot diversion downstream of the Alisal Bridge by the city, right?
Yes.
Okay, and the city in its petitions only requesting a maximum annual diversion of 1,368 acre feet, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and 1,368 acre feet is smaller than 2,400 acre feet per year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Mullen, we can pull this down for now. Okay, so part of your testimony states that you think the hydrological modeling with the Santa Ynez River model in Stetson Tech Memo 6 needs to be redone, right, for the city's current project?
I'm not sure that I specifically stated that the model needs to be redone. However, I did note that they did not perform the modeling with the current conditions of the river.
Okay. And as we just pointed out, there's less than a 0.1% change in Kachuma project deliveries from the 2 baselines we looked at based on the modeling in Stetson Tech Memo 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure that is really a relevant statistic.
Okay.
0.1%.
And you're part of the reasoning that or let me put it this way. You point to the water order 2019-0148 as something that has been issued since the Stetson analysis, right?
Yes.
Okay. That water order didn't change the above narrows accounting mechanism, correct?
It did not change the specifics for how the above narrows account is calculated, no.
Okay. And again, we've sort of been over this, but that mechanism determines how much water will be released in water rights releases to downstream diverters, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you acknowledge that the key difference with in your testimony, you acknowledge that the key difference with the 2019 order is that it imposes additional target flows for fish in above and wet years. Excuse me, above normal and wet years.
And I'm sorry, can I have that question back again, Ms.
Yes.
O'Sullivan? There was a little, I think, a ding from like your email notification or something.
Oh,
and it
I'm not
just
sure that
threw
was
off.
me, but okay, yes, happy to repeat it. Thank you, Mr. Bivens. So Mr. Van Linden, you acknowledge in your testimony that the key difference with the board's 2019 order for the Kachuma project is that it imposes additional target flows for fish in above normal and wet years, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and you also note some increases in minimum fish releases to address estimated losses between the Kachuma Lake and Highway 154 bridge, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you agree that the higher fish releases imposed by that 2019 order have the effect of replenishing the alluvial aquifer, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so the new fish releases, in a sense, actually have the effect of reducing the volume of dewater storage attributable to the above narrows account compared to the conditions before the order was issued, right?
I suppose that yes, they could have that effect. Yeah.
Okay. And you agree that the water rights releases in the above narrows account cannot exceed the total amount of dewatered storage, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, not the water rights releases. The accumulation of credits in the account.
Excuse me. Yeah, the accumulation of credits. Thank you. Cannot exceed the dewatered storage. So putting that together, the fish releases, although they're designed for fish and creating habitat for that species, do sort of have this indirect effect of reducing water rights releases when compared to no fish flows, correct?
I'm not sure that I would agree that they have the effect of reducing water rights releases. They have the effect of necessarily. I mean, they have the effect of providing additional flows that can provide replenishment of the aquifer and reduce the dewater storage. But that doesn't necessarily in all situations mean that it's going to reduce the water rights releases.
You would agree, though, that it reduces the ceiling on the above narrows account.
Yeah, it'll reduce the ceiling on the above narrows account. Yeah.
Okay. So if inflow was high enough that it would have otherwise been higher, but now the above narrows account, the dewatered storage is lower because of the fish releases, you could, in that instance, result in fewer water rights releases, correct?
I mean, hold on. Objection, vague and ambiguous. I just could not follow all of that, Ms. O'Sullivan.
Sure, I can ask the question again, though I seemed like Mr. Van Linden had followed me, but
I don't think I did, so that's irrelevant.
we just need a clear record, and I know where you're going.
Yeah, no, happy to restate the question. So, Mr. Van Linden, you've stated, we previously established, and you stated in your oral summary that the above narrows account, is attributed to, let's see, use the phrasing that you used. It accumulates credits based on the stored inflow into the Kachuma Basin when there is a live stream, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So we have
when there's no live stream.
Oh, excuse me. So we have that accumulating credits, right? And then that accumulation of credits cannot exceed the volume of dewatered storage, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, and we've just established that fish releases do have this incidental effect of lowering the volume of dewatered storage, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in a situation where the inflow that has been stored, the credits accumulated from stored inflow is higher than the dewatered storage due to a fish, and the dewatered storage is lower because of a fish release, the fish release could have an indirect effect of reducing water rights releases, right?
In that scenario, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. And then the flow targets for those additional fish releases in the 2019 order, those are upstream of the city's project, correct?
They are at Highway 154 and Alisal Bridge.
Right, and the city's proposal is to, well, I'll get to that actually. Okay, so, and generally, you would agree that it's better for member units when there are fewer fish releases triggered, right?
Generally, yes.
Okay. So generally moving diversions downstream of flow targets helps to avoid triggering fish releases, right?
I'm not sure that that's the case necessarily.
Okay. If you're diverting water downstream from a flow target, that diversion is.
So you're saying that it would have it would likely result in less depletion at the location of the compliance locations.
Right.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for helping me get there. So Ms. Mullen, if we could pull up Solvang 17, please. Okay, and if we can zoom in, I know I want to focus in on, so we can see like the red blocks and the little white dots near Alisal Bridge there. So we can zoom in on that area of the map. And maybe just over a little bit so we can see Site B fully as well. Okay, so Mr. Van Linden, this is a map of the Solvang area, and you can see the Alisal Bridge labeled there. Or I guess I should be asking you, do you see the Alisal Bridge labeled there in black, the black bar?
I do, yes.
Okay. And do you see the well 3 and well 7A notations?
Yes.
Okay. And you're aware that the city currently pumps from well 3 and well 7A as shown on this map, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so well 7A is upstream of the Alisal Bridge, right?
Yes.
Okay. And well 3 is just downstream of the Alisal Bridge, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware that the city's project shifts the city's operations downstream of the Alisal Bridge, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so because the city is proposing 2 new wells in well site B that's shown on this map. Is that your understanding? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you're aware that the city is proposing to abandon well 7A after it develops the new wells in well site B, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if the city's petition is approved, all of the city's wells would be downstream of the Alisal Bridge once well 7A is abandoned, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that is downstream of the flow targets for the fish flows established by the 2019 order, correct?
Yes.
So that's better for the Kuchuma project members, right?
Not if overall pumping increases due to the project. Because
speaking to the location, if you could limit your answer to that.
Well, I'm not a hydrogeologist, so I'm not sure that I can say for sure or can provide an opinion on that.
Okay, fair enough. Ms. Mullen, if we could go back to Solvang 74, please. And now I'd like to go to PDF page 25 and have table 18 visible. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Van Linden, you see this is titled table 18. Excuse me, I should back up. We're back at Solvang 74. This is tech memo number 6, which you're familiar with, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And we're looking at table 18, and it's titled Impacts of Solvang Alternatives on Project Water Supply and Critical Drought Periods in Acre Feet. Do you see that?
Yes.
Excuse me. Okay, and then you see on the left side that again, we have the same alternatives, GW5 and GW4 that we were previously looking at in other tables, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's a column, excuse me, kind of in the middle there titled Storage in Critical Drought Year. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And this is the storage in the Kachuma project, right?
Say that again.
This is storage in when it says, or excuse me, shortage. I said storage. When it says shortage in critical drought year, we're talking about shortages to the Kachuma project, right?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. And do you see in the row for alternative GW5 again, which is for 24 acre feet diversion downstream of the Alisal Bridge, right?
Yes.
See that? Okay. And the shortage in critical drought for that alternative 5 GW5 was 10,120 acre feet, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you can see a GW4 there just above.
Yes.
And again, that's a diversion of 1,053 acre feet per year, right?
Yes.
And that resulted in 10,300 acre foot shortage, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a greater shortage than what was experienced with the diversion with wells downstream of the Alisal Bridge, right?
With this, yes, there's a difference, yeah, with the difference between these two simulations, yes.
Okay, great. And if we could just look at GW2 as well, and that's again, this is kind of a direct comparison because GW2 as we can see is Solvang river well pumping at 2,400 acre feet, but again, this is upstream of the Alisal Bridge, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then comparing that to GW5, which is 2,400, so the same pumping, but downstream of the Alisal Bridge.
Yes.
And GW2 in the shortage in critical drought year column results in 10,460 acre feet of shortage, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's a greater shortage than what is experienced if all of that 2,400 acre foot diversion is downstream of the Alisal Bridge, correct?
Apparently so, yes.
Okay, so shortages, just kind of to summarize, shortages for Kachuma project deliveries during droughts are less when the city's pumping is downstream of the Alisal Bridge, right?
I guess that's what these modeling results indicate.
Okay, thank you. And as we just discussed, the city's proposed project shifts the city's diversion to be entirely downstream of the Alisal Bridge, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. Thank you for your time, Mr. Van Linden.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan. I will turn to the parent district. Mr. Stroud, do you have questions for Mr. Van Linden?
Only a few.
Okay,
This
please
has
go ahead.
covered a lot of what I would have covered. I'll just do a couple of things at the risk of redundancy. So good afternoon, Mr. Van Linden. Nice to meet you.
Afternoon.
Let me can we get that Solvang 74 Tech Memo 6 back up? Oh, sorry, Ms. Mullen, that was for you. Could I get Tech Memo 6 back up? Yeah, thank you. And if we could go back up to table 4, which I believe is PDF page 14. So I just want to make sure for the hearing officer's benefit and for all of our benefit, you said earlier 1 acre foot of water rights releases necessarily means 1 less acre foot either of storage in the reservoir or of deliveries to the project.
Yes.
But it does not follow, even if that's so, that 1 acre foot of pumping by a downstream user means 1 acre foot of water rights releases, correct?
That's true, yeah.
And there are a number of factors that result in the final project deliveries number that have nothing to do with downstream pumping, right?
Yes, I think that's right.
So for example, depending on the volume of water in the lake at any given time, there's more or less evaporation.
Yes.
And fish releases can be affected by the location of pumping, as you were just discussing with Ms. O'Sullivan.
And also by the storage level in the reservoir as well. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So really, when you're evaluating the effect of downstream pumping on project yield, it's not a simple equation. It sort of requires you to take all these factors into consideration.
That's right. Yes.
And this modeling, as we were just discussing with Ms. O'Sullivan, it doesn't model the exact project that we're currently looking at with Solvang, but Groundwater 5 here is essentially a larger version of the project Solvang is now contemplating, right?
Yes.
And according to this model, it would result in a net reduction to the Kachuma project of about 8 acre-feet per year for that larger project.
For this particular set of scenarios, yeah.
Yeah. And again, Groundwater 5 is a scenario that's basically a larger version of the project Solvang is now contemplating.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So leaving aside the issue you brought up earlier about differences in management of the river, we could say that the impact of Solvang's current project is something less than that 8 acre-feet if the conditions were all the same in terms of management.
I would not say so, because that would assume that the impacts as shown in this table are correct, which I don't have enough information to say.
Okay, and I wanted to ask about that. So you said you don't know what assumptions were used to generate this table. Didn't we just see earlier in the tech memo that it's all of the assumptions used for the board order EIR except for the changes in the projected Solvang pumping?
Well, but it doesn't tell me how they reoperate the reservoir in response to those changes in pumping. So nothing in that paragraph told me that information. So it doesn't tell me like how, under what conditions and by how much are water right releases increasing. It doesn't tell me how they prioritize changes in storage versus changes in project deliveries when they have a reduction in supply in response to those releases. The document itself actually doesn't even report kind of a full full set of storage results. So you can't really even evaluate kind of what the changes in storage are in Groundwater 5 versus Groundwater 4. So there's a lot of missing information here that really makes it so you can't you can't do your own simulation to perform the exact same type of modeling that they did. But also there's an incomplete set of information here to actually understand kind of what the results actually are and what they mean.
Okay, I'd like to address another issue with you. So just so I'm clear, when we talk about the differences in management of the river, in dry years, there is nothing different about the fish releases between 0148 and before 0148, right? The table 1 fish releases were unchanged.
Table 1 did not change. I mean, you can have sort of effects as you go kind of day to day, month to month, and the storage changes, and that could affect over sort of the longer term what the actual fish releases are between.
Yeah, but the order is the same.
The order is the same, yeah.
So when we looked at the table 18 about the dry year impacts earlier, nothing about that analysis would be different based on the changes in 0148.
I'm not necessarily sure about that. Again, they don't provide the details about how the modeling was done and what assumptions were made. In general, when you have more fish releases under the updated order, you're going to have less water in storage in your baseline condition. And so I don't think we can really say for sure that, that you'd have the exact same effect on the dry year diversions to the tunnel with and without the 2019-0148 in the model.
All right. Let me just check over my notes here for a second. I wanted to clarify something in case it wasn't clear for the hearing officer how this process works. So the above narrows account cannot at any time have more in it than the dewatered storage downstream of the dam, right?
Yes, that's right.
And when there's not a live stream, water accrues to that account, but it can't be above that cap. So
That's right.
if the dewatered storage goes down to below the current balance of the account, the water is essentially, I think we use the term clipped off the top, right?
Yes, it'll be capped, or yes.
All right. So when there's a loss of water to the ANA account by that clipping process, that would result in less water rights releases in the long run, because that water could then not be released as water rights releases, right?
Yes, although, I mean, if you have more dewater stored in general, you could have more releases. But I guess in general, yes, you could say that it will. Yeah.
All right. And I just want to go back to, actually, you know what? I don't think I will. I think that's all the questions I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stroud. Mr. Kvistad, does ID number 1 have any questions for Mr. Van Linden?
No, I think both the city and the parent district adequately covered our concerns.
Thank you. And now I've there you are. Ms. Hastings, do you have any questions for Mr. Van Linden?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. I will turn to the fisheries entities, and Ms. Germanario, I can start with you unless you prefer to go in a different order. Do you have questions for Mr. Van Linden?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Beal, do you have questions for Mr. Van Linden?
I do not, thanks.
Thank you. And Ms. Hall, do you have questions?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. I'll look to my team. We may need a moment, but Mr. Wooldridge and Mr. Anderson, do you have any questions for Mr. Van Linden?
I do not.
I do not.
Okay. I don't think I have questions at this time, so I will look to you, Mr. Bivens. Do you have a redirect for Mr. Van Linden?
I do. I could use a short break,
Okay,
both to look over my notes and for general purposes.
sure. Well, let's go ahead and do, I'll give you 10 minutes. That'll help me take a look as well. So let's do 10 minutes. We'll come back at 4:27.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, once we get Mr. Van Linden back online here, we can get started. There
I'm
you go.
here.
We're waiting. Mr. Bivens, did you have redirect for Mr. Van Linden?
I do. Just a couple questions. Thanks, Mr. Van Linden. So first of all, Mr. Van Linden, both Mr. Stroud and Ms. O'Sullivan referred you to modeling results in Exhibit Solvang 74, right?
That's right.
And would you rely on those results in assessing the impacts of Solvang's project on the Kachuma project?
No, I wouldn't. I think that there's a lot of missing information in that technical memorandum, both in terms of description of the assumptions that were put into the model to simulate the changes between the with Solvang project condition and without Solvang project condition, and also in the results that you would need to understand what the modeling results or what the simulation results mean. So in terms of the inputs, some of the things that I would like to see are things like under what conditions and by how much are water rights releases being made from the reservoir. It doesn't really indicate how those decisions are being made. Also, in response to those water rights releases, what are the rules that are being used to determine, whether you allow storage to go down or whether you instead make reductions in the tunnel diversions under those conditions. The document, neither Tech Memo 1 or 6 really describe the specific rules that were used by the modelers to simulate those changes between the different alternatives. And so because of that, it's not really possible to to understand how they get a result like what was shown that the dry year deliveries are are going to be have less shortage with the project than without. You really need to have that kind of detail in order to understand kind of what's going on in the model and why. And then in terms of the outputs, again, there's a number of outputs that I would like to see to really understand what's going on. For one thing, they provide these monthly tables for pumping in the downstream aquifers, but they don't provide that for the Lake Kachuma outputs. So there isn't really a monthly table that shows kind of what the water rights releases are under different conditions and different types of years, what months are they occurring. And also it doesn't really provide that information for storage either. There's a table 5 in there that provides just the median storage for particular months. But I think really to understand kind of the operational results of the model, you would need to have kind of a detailed picture of what are the changes in storage and how much is storage going down when these water rights releases are being made. And that's not present in these modeling results. So that's just to understand kind of the results as they are, and then on top of that, there's also the changes in baseline conditions that they're not accounting for here. So there are the increases in fish releases, both due to the 2019-148 water right order, as well as the additional releases that reclamation is requiring. I think you really need to do a model run that incorporates all of these changes and incorporates kind of the current condition on the river to really understand what the effects of the project are going to be. And so unfortunately, I'm not seeing any of that information in this technical memorandum.
Okay, thank you. Well, you saved me the why not question. So I appreciate that. And then just one follow-up on that point. Those modeling results also do not analyze the extent to which Solvang's diversions in excess of 1,053 acre-feet per year could be met by percolation from unregulated flow from the San Ynez River, correct?
Yes, that's right. They don't really look at that issue. All they're simulating are the operation of the water rights accounts in the reservoir in this version of the model.
Okay, and Mr. Van Linden, have you seen in the materials that you've reviewed in preparing for your testimony in this proceeding, have you seen any analysis that quantifies the extent to which fish releases would reduce the amount of dewatered storage that would be caused by Solvang's alluvial diversions?
No, I have not. So, I do agree that those fish releases would probably have an effect of reducing the dewater storage in general, but that effect occurs both with and without the project in place. So I have not seen anything in any of the documentation that I've looked at that really quantifies how much additional benefit or would you get in the context of having the project operation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van Linden. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Ms. O'Sullivan, do you have any additional questions based on that redirect?
Yes, just briefly. Hi again, Mr. Van Linden.
Hello.
So just to clarify, your testimony is that things like, reoperation of the reservoir and timing of water releases, and the rules that allow storage to go down or reduce what goes down the tunnel to the Kachuma members, those types of criteria are not included in the base assumptions of the San Ynez River hydrological model.
They are included in the baseline, but we need to understand how they were changed under the different alternatives to really understand what the model results are telling us.
Okay, so your understanding of the San Ynez River hydrological model is that in addition to changing project-specific criteria, you also change criteria with the the inputs for the operation of the Kachuma project?
Yes, there's some discretionary decisions that are made in the model that I think you would change based on your change in your operations. Yeah.
Okay, and have you ever personally run the San Ynez River hydrological model used by the board in the version specifically used by the board in the Kachuma project hearings?
No, I'm familiar with the current version in Riverware, but it has the same basic operational parameters that that original model did. It was developed based on that model.
Okay, so your familiarity is with the Riverware model, right?
Yeah, but I think that the experience with that model translates back to being able to comment on modeling done with the previous model.
Okay, but again, you have not personally used the model that was used in the board for the Kachuma project hearing, right?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Appreciate your time, Mr. Van Linden.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Stroud, do you have any follow-up questions?
Just one based on that, because I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So the San Ynez River hydrologic model that Stetson used for Tech Memo 6, that the board used in 0148 proceedings, does have a baseline assumption about all those criteria you mentioned earlier.
It does, yeah.
And what we read earlier in part of Tech Memo 6 is that other than changing Solvang's projected pumping, all of the assumptions were left unchanged.
I don't think that I recall reading that.
Maybe Ms. O'Sullivan can help me.
I don't think that I think it's silent on the other assumptions. I don't think that it states that none of the other assumptions changes were made.
Now I may be confused because I thought I recalled that. And maybe Ms. O'Sullivan, can you do you know the reference we're making here?
I can look it up.
Yes, I can provide the citations again. There's two. So one is to Tech Memo number 1, which is Solvang 69, and that's, excuse me, PDF page 3, section 2. And the associated table 1, which is on the following page. And then in Stetson Tech Memo 6, which incorporates that language by cross-reference from Tech Memo 1. So Solvang 74, PDF page 10, section 4, and table 3.
Okay, I mean, maybe I could, I guess what I would say is that it's not clear what changes, if any, were made in these other kind of the way the reservoir operates. And, that's why I've been saying that I think that in order to better understand this, we need to have a clear explanation of what was changed and what wasn't, and why we're seeing the results that we're seeing in the model. And I don't think that we have that.
So let me ask a follow-up question just to make sure I understand that your testimony is that even though the memorandums say that the other assumptions remain the same, it's not clear how the incorporation of input the changes in input related to Solvang's operations may have affected how the reservoir is operated.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay. I will hand it back to you, Mr. Stroud, if I'm not sure if that completed your question.
I think that's as far as we're going to get.
Okay. And I think that is helpful and clarifies for me. I believe that completes our witnesses for the day. So with that, I want to thank you, Mr. Van Linden, for joining us. I really appreciate. I didn't miss you, Ms. No, you didn't have questions. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anyone. Mr. Van Linden, I really appreciate your testimony today. I appreciate your time and your joining us, and you are excused. Thank you for sticking with us this afternoon. We have just a few minutes before our hard stop. I do want to talk about a few things. One is I think we are agreed that we're going to aim for January 19th for an additional hearing day. To hear from, it sounds like probably just Mr. Nicely, but I know some parties reserved the option of identifying surrebuttal witnesses related to the scope, within the scope of surrebuttal that I identified. I think what we should do is that I will issue an amended hearing notice that articulates the scope of that surrebuttal, and then I'll set a deadline for any other party who, if you decide that you want to call a surrebuttal witness, like an amended NOI, just let us know. I don't want to hear. I'm really not inviting new witnesses at all. Just, but I know some of you reserved your right, so I'd set a deadline for you to let us know. Ms. O'Sullivan, you had offered to make a suggestion as to when surrebuttal, any additional surrebuttal testimony from Mr. Nicely would be due, and that maybe by the end of the week. So does the end of the day on Friday of this week work for a deadline on that?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Kinsey. And certainly if we're able to connect with Mr. Nicely earlier than that, we will let everyone know as soon as possible, but that would give us a little flexibility to meet with him and understand his timing and when he thinks he could make that available.
Thank you. With that, I was going to move on to closing briefs and this collateral estoppel issue, which I think is still floating out there and we should talk about, procedurally talk about. Is there anything else on the additional hearing day that we should address now?
I'm sorry, did you say when we're handling the remaining offers of exhibits?
I didn't. I keep deferring that. Well, now we're doing it January 19th.
I don't mean, I'm not trying to pressure you on it. I just want to make sure I don't miss it.
Well,
I don't think we're going to get it done in 20 minutes. So
January 19th, if we have a limited, I mean, if we're hearing only from one or two witnesses, I think it's a good day to do it because we'll have time. Ms. Halls, I'm sorry. Did you have something to add?
I just had one question. Since I started CalTrout's offer previously, I just wanted to know where we would pick up on that, especially since I'll be passing the baton to someone else at that point.
I think we called it, I think I asked for a preview, although it was a very detailed preview. So I think we'll, unless you think there's a problem, we would just essentially start again with the offer.
Okay, and so the offer would include the same list that I read off previously, and should they be prepared for any kind of argument on the outstanding issues, or I just want to make sure I'm providing the full.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I have notes on this. My intent with CalTrout is I'll be able to rule on the deferred rulings other than any collateral estoppel arguments before we get to before January 19th. So I don't think so. I think the only thing that could come up would be hearsay objections. The other parties may identify hearsay objections, but those would then be submitted in writing we need a new deadline for that, but they would be submitted in writing, and then you would have a chance to respond to those. Not you. Hopefully, you'll be out on maternity leave. Your colleagues will have a chance to respond to those in the closing at the same time as the closing brief.
Okay,
Submittal.
understood.
Does that make sense?
That does. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else before we talk about closing briefs and how to address the collateral estoppel question?
Just noting that we would still be needing to move our exhibits into evidence.
Yes, and we will do that January 19th. That's the plan.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And sorry if I missed that. I actually ended up getting dropped for a moment.
I noticed that, yes. And I think that we did just
I don't know what
discuss it.
happened. My computer got tired. I don't know.
All right, I'm going to turn to, I do want to talk about there are a number of objections to exhibits based on this, and just generally the scope of the hearing issues, I think. Based on a collateral estoppel argument, I think I had hinted at addressing those in, what I'm trying to figure out is whether to address those wrapped into the closing brief, or whether you want to have separate briefing, and if you have separate briefing, well, either way, whether you want to have responsive briefing where there would be an opening brief on the issue and an opportunity to respond. I think maybe I'll turn to the city of Solvang first, because I think this is one of, it may be primarily your issue and objection, if I'm thinking about this correctly. Yes, I think so. Do you have a proposal about the best way to handle this?
I don't.
Okay.
The
it's on the
city
fly.
made these objections, and I do believe the parent district and ID1 and the ALSL joined as well, I believe. So Stephanie, probably let me know if I didn't get that right. But on these collateral estoppel issues, especially with respect to the 2016 BIOP, and some of the supporting documents that are used as exhibits. So, I think there should be briefing. I'm open to the arrangement.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mr. Kim might have another suggestion.
So Officer Kinsey, if I may, I think it would be best if we coordinated with the other parties.
Okay.
And perhaps if we got back with you on that issue, the same deadline as this coming Friday.
Does that give you enough time? That's only to coordinate with other parties. Do that. It's a noble attempt. If you can do it, that would be great. I would very much appreciate if you can talk to each other and submit a proposal on how to handle that. If you can do it by the end of the day on Friday, please do. If you need a few more days to talk to each other, just when you submit whatever you do on Friday, just let me know that you.
So okay, so thank you for giving us that latitude. So we will endeavor to meet and confer with those other parties who are interested on the collateral estoppel issue, and if we can, we'll submit a proposal by Friday. But if we can't, we'll in our submission on Friday, we'll let you know when we can.
Yes, please. Thank you.
And Ms. Kinsey, the submission on Friday, I'm imagining to just be an email to you and your staff with everyone copied.
That sounds fine.
Great,
that can be efficient.
If I may ask Ms. Kinsey, we did submit briefing on this issue during the original rounds of objections. So I just want to clarify, based on your position here, that you found that insufficient to determine whether collateral estoppel does or doesn't apply.
It's not necessarily, well,
just trying to understand, like in terms of trying to agree to deadlines and such things, trying to understand the scope of what you're, what you would find helpful here.
I think in many instances, and this is not a comment on the fisheries entity's responses to the collateral estoppel objection. I think the collateral estoppel was raised generally by the city and some of the other water users without more detailed briefing. So it's more my assessment that I think there's not sufficient briefing to make an assessment of whether collateral estoppel might apply based on the city and the other water users briefing to date. and on the elements of collateral estoppel. I don't have a comment. I don't think it may be that your response to that would be essentially a cut and paste of what you already briefed. So is that helpful?
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to muddy the waters.
I didn't mean
but-
it to be an assessment of, what's out there is inadequate. I was more thinking of from the responsive end. I was more thinking on the other end of it.
Okay.
We have 12 minutes, so let's maybe talk about closing briefs quickly. I would, because of the January 19th date, I would anticipate pushing back the closing brief deadline a little bit. What I'm thinking about is February 15th. The January 19th should be very limited, so I would imagine you can have a lot of work done before then. But I think it makes sense to push it back a little bit. So that's what I was thinking. On page limits, I'm open to discussion, but what I had come up with based on our earlier discussions throughout this hearing is increasing Solvang's page limit for a closing brief to 40 pages. That's double. That's long. It's a lot. I'll read it, but that's in recognition of the fact that Solvang is responding to all of the arguments, biology, hydrologic, and these legal water rights issues about injury. My proposal was for the fisheries entities to have a combined limit of 30 pages, and you could divvy that up or not as you choose, the 3 fisheries entities, and then 30 pages for the districts. That's the parent district, ID number 1, and Alisal Guest Ranch. My hope is you won't need 30 pages, but it seemed commensurate. And then CCRB, who strikes me as a little bit out on your own, but you are a single party. I was thinking the 20-page limit may be appropriate. Now, this is, I have to make a decision, but I'm going to hear from all of you on this, but let me go in the order. Let me start with Solvang, Mr. Kim or Ms. O'Sullivan. Do you have any comments on either the total number of 40 pages or the relative relative numbers?
Thank you, Officer Kunze, for taking all those factors into consideration. Just several thoughts. So number one, in terms of responses to evidentiary objections that you are anticipating to be submitted with the closing brief, just a suggestion that perhaps maybe those responses to evidentiary objections be filed in a separate document and subject to like a 10-page limit or something like that, just to divide the issues more clearly.
Yes.
Yeah. So
that makes sense. So you're thinking the collateral estoppel issue and responses to hearsay objections?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So those would be outside, the briefing on the substantive issues. So that's number one. And then number two, not to get too deep into the weeds, but when you're talking about the page limit, are we talking about on pleading paper, double spaced and 12 font, or because that does affect?
It does. I am talking. Yes. Well, on double spaced and 12 font, you can decide whether to put it on pleading paper, but
okay,
people often do.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, those are my initial reactions.
Thank you.
And then lastly,
I'm sorry.
and lastly, I forgot. I think it is prudent to, given the extra day that we didn't contemplate previously, I think it does make sense to push the due date to February 15th.
Great, thank you. I will look to you, Mr. Bivens. Do you have comments on these issues?
So you referenced 30 pages for the districts, and that is that for, I guess, the downstream water users combined? So Alisal, ID1, and the parent district, are you talking 30 pages combined for those
combined,
3 entities?
yes. And they can divvy it up as you would see fit.
That makes sense. Or not. Yeah. That makes sense to me. I guess I would, and I don't know that I also need 30 pages, but it does seem like the issues that those parties will be primarily briefing are the CCRB water rights issues. And then I have that. And in addition, I do have some things to say about biology. I would appreciate having the same number of pages as the downstream users. And I'm not going to use them unless I need them. I will try to be concise, but I'd like the same treatment.
That's fair. So you're putting out a proposal of up to 30 pages for CCRB, commensurate with the fish entities and the 3 water users.
Correct.
Yeah. I'll continue around the room and then we'll hopefully make a decision here. I'll go through the other water users. Mr. Stroud, did you have a comment on this issue?
I'm thinking it through, the combined page limit with ID1 and Alisal, and I think that's all right with me. I'd want to check with Mr. Kvistad and Miss Hastings emailed me that she's fine with it. But I don't know what Mr. Kvistad thinks of it. I think I'm all right with us, the 3 of us working together.
Mr. Kvistad, you're welcome to chime in if you'd like to.
No, I think the 30-page limit between the parent district, ID1 and Alisal is fine from our perspective. The concern I had with Mr. Kim had brought up about a 10-page limit for evidentiary objections and addressing the collateral estoppel. And I'm afraid that the issue for collateral estoppel may need more.
Okay. I think, well, let's separate that out. I can understand that, and it sounds like maybe as part of your proposal, here's what I'll do is I'll invite comments on a page limit for the collateral estoppel briefing as part of your proposal on how to handle it.
Okay, that'd be great.
That would be, let's do that. And now I of course want to turn to the fisheries entities. I don't know who wants to go first. Ms. Beal, I see you're off mute if you care to comment.
Well, I mean, no offense, but I feel that the 30-page limit for all 3 of us who presented a combination of 5 witnesses is not fair compared with the city's 40 pages. And I would also just like to note that, you know, as a federal agency, National Marine Fisheries Service has its, own separate interests in this matter. And due to our internal approval processes, it would be extremely difficult for me to join in a brief. I was assuming we would have separate briefs and potentially incorporate by reference, arguments for my example, arguments of CDFW and Keltrout as appropriate. I mean, that I can do without going through official approval channels, but otherwise to limit NIMS to a 10-page brief feels very restrictive to me. That's 10 double space pages to summarize what I consider to be very important testimony on the effects of the projects on a highly imperiled and federally protected species.
So what would you propose? I mean, you make a good point about the approval. I do, as someone who also works for an agency, I understand the approval processes sometimes are a challenge.
Well, I'll just tell you that I understood the original proposal to be that each fishery entity would have 20 pages, and that within those 20 pages, as I mentioned, I could potentially incorporate by reference, information that we agreed with CDFW and Keltrout witnesses, but then I would be focusing, of course, on our own testimony and issues relevant to this proceeding. So that was my original understanding. And even though 20, is not necessarily a lot of pages, I was, feeling that we could work with that. But going from 20 to 10, again, feels very restrictive. So
it's a big difference.
Yeah.
I'm still holding to our hard stop. So let me hear quickly and make a decision at this moment. What I will do is I will wrap this into part of the amended hearing notice so that you will have information about the page limits, but well before January 19th, so you can plan accordingly. But let me turn to CDFW. Ms. Germanario, do you have comments on this?
I would just join in the comments Ms. Beal just set forth. You know, our understanding from the pre-hearing conference discussions was also that each fisheries entity would have 20 pages at least, and I think we had pushed back even on that may not be enough given the number of witnesses and the complexity, and in some areas we are not completely aligned. So I believe that would be more appropriate to have separate filings.
Okay, and Ms. Hall, do you want to jump in here?
Just ditto that my understanding was 20 pages per party, the fisheries parties each, and I think that was already a little bit tight, so hoping for more space and agree that we all take slightly different positions and weigh in on different issues, but I'd be more than happy to, commit to avoid duplication where possible, on something along those lines.
Great, thank you. I appreciate your input, and I will issue a ruling on this when I issue an amended notice. So with that, I will expect.
Ms. Kinsey, may I just chime in? I know Ms. Germanario did, but
yes, sure.
I just also wanted to remind you that when it comes to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the reason that I had suggested greater than 20 pages for us is because we're dealing with hydrogeology issues, fish issues, and terrestrial issues compared to the fish agencies, the other agencies which are primarily dealing with fish issues. And so I would even, perhaps push for greater than 20 pages, at least for CDFW. But if that's the most we get, it would certainly be better, echoing Ms. Germanario's comments, Ms. Beals, to be back at the 20 page. So if you can take that into account, I'd greatly appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I will expect, just to reiterate from Solvang, well, at least led by Solvang, a proposal on the collateral, how we handle the collateral estoppel issue, and then also a proposed deadline for submission of additional rebuttal testimony. We will plan to meet on January 19th. I will issue, after I've heard from the parties, I will issue, it may require more than one, but I will issue an amended hearing notice or a ruling of some kind laying out what we talked about here. And if there are any problems, of course, if you identify anything that doesn't fit with what we talked about, submit something in writing, and we can, if we need to, we can address things on January 19th. We will handle the evidentiary issues at that time, in the sense of, with the exception of the collateral estoppel issue, which will be still outstanding. And thank you. Thank you for sticking with me until 5 o'clock. Thank you for getting through everything today, and I will see you on January 19th. Have a good one. I appreciate it.
Thank you.